Celeste Harrow didn't even look at her when she said it. She just snapped her fingers the way you'd snap at a dog and pointed at the table behind Nia like she was part of the furniture. Clear that now. The whole ballroom heard it, and not one person said a word. Nia Caldwell stood there in her midnight blue dress, the one she'd saved 3 paychecks to buy, surrounded by chandeliers and champagne, and people who had never worked a day they didn't choose to, and she felt something crack open inside her chest. Not break, crack, like the first fault line before an earthquake nobody sees coming. She had no idea that the most dangerous man in Chicago was watching from the balcony above. And she had no idea that by the end of this night, she would be the one they feared. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel tells stories that stay with you. Hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. And if you make it to the end tonight, hit that like button. It tells me you were here. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand what happened in that ballroom, you have to understand who Nia Caldwell really was. She almost didn't go. That was the thing Nia kept coming back to later, in the quiet weeks after everything collapsed and rebuilt itself into something she barely recognized. She almost called in sick. She'd stood in front of her bathroom mirror that Friday afternoon, holding her eyeliner like a question mark, staring at her own face and asking herself whether any of it was worth the trouble. The gala wasn't her event. Technically, it wasn't even her job. She was an administrative assistant at the Harrow Foundation, a title that sounded more important than it was, which basically meant she answered phones, organized filing systems that nobody used correctly, and occasionally reminded her direct supervisors, Marcus, that he had meetings he'd already forgotten about twice that week. She was good at the work. She was thorough, she was fast, and she had the kind of quiet competence that organizations relied on while simultaneously underpaying. She knew all of this. She'd known it for the better part of 2 years. The gala invitation had been included in her benefits package when they hired her 1 ticket to annual charity showcase, framed as a perk. In 2 years, she had never used it. The first year, she'd given the ticket to her coworker Denise, who came back Monday morning with stories about shrimp cocktail and a live jazz quartet, and a woman in a gown that cost more than their combined monthly salaries. The second year, the ticket sat on Nia's kitchen counter until the date passed, and she threw it away. This year, Marcus had practically begged her to attend. Someone from admin needs to be there for setup coordination. He told her over the phone, which was Marcus's way of saying that he himself wasn't going to handle the setup coordination and needed someone reliable within arm's reach in case something went sideways. It's just a few hours. You look great and formal, Nia. Come on. She'd agreed mostly because she didn't want to spend another Friday night on her couch watching television and pretending that was enough. At 31, Nia had built a life that was stable and respectable and almost entirely joyless in the way that stable and respectable lives sometimes become when you've spent too many years doing the responsible thing without asking yourself if the responsible thing was also the thing that made you feel alive. She had no mother to call anymore. That was the core of it. Her mother, Loretta Caldwell, had died 14 months earlier after a short and vicious fight with pancreatic cancer that took her so fast. Nia still had moments, usually early in the morning, before she was fully awake, where she reached for her phone to call and then remembered. Loretta had been the ballast that kept Nia's life centered, not because Nia was fragile or incapable, but because Loretta was the kind of woman who made you feel like your existence had weight, consequence, like you mattered in some specific and irreplaceable way. Without her, Friday nights had gotten very long, so she put on the midnight blue gown. She spent 40 minutes on her hair and another 20 convincing herself the dress looked fine. It did. Objectively, it was a beautiful dress. But Nia had spent enough years in rooms that weren't built for women who looked like her to know that beautiful and accepted were 2 different words, and she drove to the Meridian Hotel on Michigan Avenue with Loretta's pearl earrings in her ears, because wearing them felt like bringing her mother into the room. The Meridian's ballroom was exactly what you'd expect from a venue that charged $1,200 a plate for charity events. 12-foot ceilings with hand-painted crown molding, crystal chandeliers that scattered light across marble floors like something out of a movie about people who'd never struggled. Tables draped in ivory linen with centerpieces that cost more than Nia's monthly car payment. String quartet in the corner playing something classical that she recognized but couldn't name. She found Marcus almost immediately, near the entrance to the kitchen corridor, looking flustered in a tuxedo that didn't quite fit his shoulders. He thanked her for coming, handed her a laminated seating chart, and told her she was technically assigned to table 14, but that he might need her to check on the silent auction items around 9 o'clock. Then he got pulled away by someone with a headset and a clipboard, and that was essentially the last saw of him for the first 2 hours. She was fine with that. She found table 14 near the back, which she'd expected, and introduced her to the 2 other people already seated there. An older couple from the foundation's accounting department who were pleasant enough but spent most of dinner talking to each other about a trip they were planning to Portugal. Nia ate her salmon, drank 1 glass of white wine, and watched the room the way she'd always watched rooms. She wasn't entirely sure she belonged in, carefully, from the edges, cataloging. It was a skill she'd developed early. Growing up in the South Side with a mother who worked double shifts and a neighborhood that required you to read situations fast, Nia had learned to observe people before she engaged with them. To notice the subtle architecture of a room who had power, who was performing power, who was afraid, who was bored. It had made her good at her job and somewhat lonely at parties, but it also meant she rarely got surprised. She noticed Celeste Harrow the moment she entered. Celeste was 34, though she carried herself with a particular confidence of someone who had never genuinely had to earn anything, and had therefore developed an iron certainty that the world's appreciation was simply her natural due. She was thin in the way that took real effort and money, the kind of thin that came from personal trainers and nutritionists, and probably whatever injection was fashionable that season. And she wore a white gown with architectural shoulders that made her look like a magazine cover. Her hair was blonde and perfectly structured. Her jewelry was real. Her laugh carried across the room like she wanted it to. She was also, Nia knew from 2 years of foundation work, deeply involved in the Harrow Foundation's fundraising committee. On paper, Celeste was a passionate philanthropist. In practice, Celeste signed off on things and showed up for photographs and let other people like Nia, do actual work, while she collected the credit and the social capital. Nia didn't dislike her exactly. She didn't have the luxury of disliking people she had to work around. She'd just noted her, filed her away, and gotten on with it. She wasn't watching when it happened. She was walking back. From checking on the silent auction table, Marcus had texted 8:47, asking her to make sure the bid sheets were properly labeled, and she was cutting through the outer edge of the ballroom near a cluster of tables close to the window. She had her laminated seating chart in one hand and her small clutch in the other, and she was moving quickly because the heels she'd worn were beginning to register their complaint in her left ankle. "Excuse me," Nia slowed. Yes, I'm talking to you." She turned. Celeste Harrow was standing at a table nearby with 3 other women, all of them in formal wear, all of them holding champagne glasses, all of them looking at Nia with the particular expression of people who had just collectively decided something. "This table needs to be cleared," Celeste said. She said it the way you'd say the carpet needs to be vacuumed, as a statement of fact directed at the person responsible for vacuuming. "There's an empty bottle and used glasses. Can you take care of that?" Nia looked at the table, then she looked back at Celeste. There was a beat, just a beat, where she measured the situation. The white gown, the pearl earrings in her own ears. The laminated seating chart still visible in her hand. The fact that the actual catering staff were identifiable by their black uniforms and white gloves, neither of which she was wearing. "I think you might be looking for someone from the catering team," Nia said, keeping her voice even. "I'm a guest." The silence that followed was the kind that happens when a room quietly adjusts its attention without appearing to. Celeste blinked. Then she looked at Nia the way someone looks at a word they don't recognize, with a kind of mild, flat confusion that had nothing to do with actually trying to understand. I'm sorry. I'm a guest, Nia said again. I work for the Foundation's administrative department. My name is Nia Caldwell. One of the women beside Celeste made a sound. It wasn't quite a laugh. It was something more careful than that, a kind of social signal, the audio equivalent of raising an eyebrow. Celeste smiled. It didn't reach anything near her eyes. Right, she said. Of course. And then, because the pause afterward was 1 second too long and her eyes moved once, very deliberately, from Nia's face down the length of her body and back up again, the entire meaning of the exchange shifted. Nia felt it. She felt it the way you feel weather changing, not a thought exactly, more like a physical recognition in the chest. Turn to leave. Actually, wait. Celeste's voice sharpened just slightly. You said you work for the Foundation? Nia stopped. She didn't fully turn back around. Yes. Then you can help us, Celeste said, and now her voice had acquired a different quality, something performative, like she was no longer just speaking to Nia, but to the people around them. It's literally your job to make sure the evening runs smoothly. So she gestured at the table again, the glasses. Nia turned around then. My job, she said slowly, is administrative coordination, not table service. She kept her voice completely level. If you need something cleared, I'm happy to find someone from catering who can help you. Oh, for heaven's sake. Celeste set down her champagne glass with a small, decisive click. It's not a negotiation. It's a dirty table. Then you're right, Nia said. It should be easy for someone from catering to handle. Would you like me to flag one of them down? Another beat. Celeste's smile had developed a different quality, thinner, colder, with something underneath it that Nia recognized as the specific displeasure of someone who was accustomed to winning small social skirmishes and was finding this one unexpectedly resistant. One of the other women, auburn hair, a green gown, the particular expression of someone enjoying a situation they're pretending not to enjoy, leaned slightly towards Celeste and murmured something. Whatever she said, Celeste's expression shifted. She said, and her voice had gone quieter, more conversational, the register of someone speaking only to their immediate circle, even though the circle had grown. I don't know why they insist on giving out guest invitations to the support staff. Creates these, she gestured vaguely in Nia's direction, situations. Someone laughed. Actually, she laughed, a short, sharp sound, gone almost immediately, but absolutely there. Nia felt something move in her face that she quickly controlled. There was a crash nearby, sudden, jarring, the sound of a serving tray meeting the marble floor with significant velocity. Heads turned. A young waiter in the black and white catering uniform was crouching down, his face red, beginning to retrieve the scattered silverware and napkins. The attention in their little corner of the ballroom had fractured, some people looking at the waiter, some still looking at Nia and Celeste. In the window of distraction, Nia had almost decided to simply walk away. Let it go. Carry the weight of it home in the car and process it quietly, the way she processed most things quietly, alone, because that was what you did when the alternative was falling apart, in public. Then Celeste pointed at her. She did it. The words came out so casually, so flatly certain, that for a moment Nia wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. She bumped into him. Celeste continued, addressing no one in particular, and everyone generally, her voice rising just slightly above the ambient noise of the room. She knocked into the server and caused that. It was her. The waiter looked up. He was maybe 22 years old, clearly mortified, clearly wanting to disappear. And Nia watched his eyes dart between her and Celeste and back again with the desperate calculation of someone very young, trying to determine which mistake was less costly. That's not true, Nia said. Her voice came out steady. She was grateful for that. Because her hands were not steady, she was gripping the laminated seating chart in her right hand with the kind of pressure that left marks. Standing right here. I didn't touch him. I didn't bump into anyone. I saw it clearly, Celeste said, with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never for seriously been contradicted in a social setting and therefore had no muscle memory for what to do when they were wrong. You walked past him too quickly, and you didn't watch where you were going. Celeste, one of her friends, said quietly, with the tone of someone who could see where this was going and wasn't entirely comfortable. Celeste ignored her. Someone should really help clean this up, she announced to the wider table area. And then, looking directly at Nia, you should help clean this up. You caused it. Phones appeared. Nia noticed them in her peripheral vision, 2, 3, then more, rising to the kind of casual documentary angle that said, I'm filming without filming. This is just my phone in my hand. She had been in rooms before where people took out their phones when something was happening, and it had never meant anything good for the person at the center of the situation. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Celeste. She looked at the scattered napkins and silverware on the floor. She looked at the young waiter who was still crouching there, miserable, surrounded by the chaos of what was not, in any way, Nia's fault. I'm going to find someone from event management, Nia said, carefully and clearly. That's actually what I'm here to do tonight. If you need assistance with anything related to the foundation, you can speak with Marcus Delaney. She turned to go. Of course you'd walk away, Celeste said to her back. Stopped. She didn't want to. Stopping was the wrong tactical decision, and she knew it was exactly what Celeste wanted, that one extra beat of drama that the cameras could capture. Every sensible, strategic part of her brain was screaming at her to keep walking. The door was 20 feet away. Marcus was somewhere in this building. She could be outside in 3 minutes, and in her car in 10, and home in her own apartment within the hour, where she could take off these heels and sit on her kitchen floor if she needed to, which sometimes was the only thing that helped. But there was something else in her, something older and more stubborn than strategy. Her mother's voice, not as a comfort but as a specific instruction, you do not let Pitbull reduce you in public and then walk away acting like it was fine. Because it was not fine, and you know it, and they know it, and pretending otherwise is not dignity. Dignity is staying. She turned back around. I'm not walking away, she said. I'm doing my job, which is what I came here to do. And I didn't cause that. She nodded toward the floor. And you know I didn't. For a moment, just a moment, something shifted in Celeste Harrow's face. Something that might have been the beginning of recalibration. Possibility that this person in front of her was not going to behave the way this situation was supposed to go. Then Vivian Harrow appeared. Nia had seen Vivian's photograph plenty of times. She was a fixture in Chicago's philanthropic and real estate circles. 61 years old, self-made billionaire. The kind of woman whose presence in a room immediately reorganized the social gravity. Vivian Harrow had built the kind of reputation that made people speak of her with the particular reverence reserved for those who have accumulated enough power that their flaws get reinterpreted as character. She was also Celeste's mother, and she had heard enough. What's happening here? Vivian asked, and her voice carried the quality of someone who had developed, over 60 years, the specific kind of authority that doesn't need volume to land. Nothing, Mother, Celeste said, in the voice she used with Vivian that was slightly different from all her other voices, slightly more careful, slightly more like someone being watched. This she gestured at Nia. Woman was just causing a disturbance. I wasn't causing anything, Nia said, and she was aware that her voice was a fraction, less controlled than it had been 30 seconds ago. Not much, but enough. I was walking through the ballroom doing my job, and your daughter told the room that I knocked over a server's tray, which didn't happen. Vivian looked at her, not with Celeste's performative contempt, with something more clinical. The look of someone sorting through a situation for its usefulness. And you are? Vivian asked. Nia Caldwell, administrative assistant with the foundation. Vivian's eyes moved across her once. It was brief and complete and communicated very efficiently, an entire assessment. I see. And what happened next would stay with Nia for the rest of her life. Not because of what Vivian said, what she said was almost nothing. Just a quiet word to the security personnel who had materialized near the edge of the small crowd that had gathered. What stayed with Nia was the look on Vivian Harrow's face when she said it. Not cruel, not angry, just blank. The way you look when you're making a very minor administrative decision that doesn't require any emotional engagement. The security guard was maybe 10 feet away and moving in Nia's direction when the glass hit her. She didn't see Celeste move. She only felt the cold shock of it. Red wine. Expensive. She would think later. catching the color of it as it soaked through the midnight blue fabric of her dress and the sound of the glass landing somewhere, and then the laughter. Not giggling, not the suppressed, polite social sound of people who know they're watching something that should embarrass them. Actual laughter, the kind with teeth in it. Nia stood there in her wine-soaked dress, with Loretta's pearl earrings in her ears and the laminated seating chart in her hand, and 30 or 40 phone cameras aimed at her. And she felt the tears build behind her eyes, the way pressure builds behind a dam, physical, real, and absolutely out of her control. She did not cry. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of Celeste Harrow and her mother and the 40 strangers recording her humiliation for their social media feeds, while the string quartet in the corner played something classical she still couldn't name. Vivienne spoke to the security guard again. "Please escort her out through the main entrance," she said, with the same blank efficiency she might use to redirect a catering order. The main entrance, not a side door, not a staff exit. The main entrance, where the rest of the gala guests were still arriving, where the photographers from the society pages were stationed, where everyone would see. The security guard looked at Nia. He was young and clearly uncomfortable, and she could see that he was not enjoying this assignment, but discomfort and action are two different things. And his hand moved toward her elbow with the firm, practiced motion of someone executing an instruction. Nia stepped back just one step. "Don't touch me," she said. The room went very, very quiet. Not silent, there was still the ambient noise of a ballroom full of people, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of 100 conversations, but in their immediate circle, in the 10 or 15 feet of floor that had become, without anyone formally deciding, the stage for this particular moment, the silence was complete. And in that silence, from somewhere above, the ballroom doors swung closed. Not slowly, not gently, with the particular authority of heavy doors being deliberately shut by someone who controls the room they're attached to. The music stopped. The security guard froze. Celeste Harrow looked up. And from the shadowed balcony above the grand staircase, that curved down into the ballroom like something from a different century, a figure that had been standing in the darkness for longer than anyone realized, began to move. He didn't hurry. That was the first thing Nia noticed, watching him descend the staircase while the room held its collective breath. He moved the way people move when they have spent their entire adult life in rooms where hurrying would be a form of weakness. One hand on the railing, not gripping it, just resting there. A dark suit that the way expensive things fit when they've been made for one specific body. Dark hair, cut close. A face that Nia couldn't quite read from where she was standing, but which the entire room seemed to know, because she could feel the shift in every person around her as they recognized him. She didn't know him. She'd never seen him before. But she knew, from the way Celeste's hand had stopped moving, and Vivienne Harrow's expression had done something complicated, and the security guard had taken one careful step backward, that this man was not someone who arrived at places. He was someone places changed for. He reached the bottom of the staircase. The crowd parted not because anyone was pushed, not because security cleared a path, but simply because the people standing between him and the center of the room each individually made the decision to move, and none of them could have told you exactly why. He crossed the ballroom floor without looking at a single one of the billionaires, investors, and socialites who turned toward him, with the urgent social need to be acknowledged. His eyes were on Nia, not on the wine stain on her dress, not on the phone cameras still raised around her, not on Celeste or Vivienne or the frozen security guard. On Nia, he stopped beside her, close enough that she could see his face clearly sharp-featured, unsmiling, with eyes that were doing the careful, thorough work of taking in the entire scene without appearing to move at all. He said nothing for a moment. Then he looked at the wine on her dress. His jaw shifted, just slightly, just once. He removed his jacket. He placed it, without preamble and without asking permission, around Nia's wine-soaked shoulders. The ballroom did not breathe. Celeste Harrow laughed. It came out too high and too fast, the laugh of someone trying to control a situation that was visibly escaping them. "Roman," she said, and her voice had acquired the particular texture of someone performing ease they did not feel, What are you doing? She's nobody. She's the foundation's. She's administrative staff. The man stopped her with nothing more than the direction of his attention. He turned to look at Celeste Harrow with the kind of unhurried, complete focus that made her sentence simply stop existing in the air between them. I know who she is, he said. His voice was low. Not quiet, there's a difference. Not soft. Low. The register of someone who has spent years in rooms where speaking too loudly was a form of vulnerability. Celeste blinked. You have known her for 4 months, Roman D'Angelo said. And the room shifted on its axis. The silence that followed Roman D'Angelo's words was not the comfortable kind. It was the kind of silence that happens when a room full of people simultaneously realizes that the rules of the evening have just been rewritten by someone who had the authority to do that, and they did not know it until right now. Champagne glasses hovered halfway to lips. Conversations that had been paused became conversations that were forgotten entirely. The string quartet, having stopped playing when the doors closed, had not resumed, and the 4 musicians sat with their instruments in their laps looking at each other, with the careful expressions of people who very much wanted to be somewhere else. Celeste Harrow's mouth was open, not dramatically, not like a movie, just open. The way a mouth goes when the brain has stopped sending coherent instructions because the situation has departed so completely from every expected outcome that the body's default systems have momentarily taken over, and the default system has no protocol for this. 4 months, Vivienne said. Her voice was different now. The clinical efficiency was still there, but underneath it, something had shifted, a recalibration so subtle that most people in the room probably missed it. Nia didn't miss it. She'd spent 2 years reading the subtext of conversations she wasn't supposed to fully understand. Roman turned to look at Vivienne. He didn't answer her immediately. He let thigh silence sit between them for a moment, the way you let something sit on a stove deliberately, with intent, watching to see exactly how much heat it could take. Vivienne, he said finally, just her name, the way you'd say it to someone who had just done something that required them to be very clearly identified before anything else happened. Vivienne's chin came up a fraction of an inch. Roman. Her voice had gone careful. The kind of careful that comes from years of high-stakes negotiation. I wasn't aware you had any connection to. I know you weren't, he said. Another pause. He adjusted the jacket on Nia's shoulders just slightly, just with one hand. A small precise movement that somehow had the effect of making it extremely clear to every person watching that his attention was not fully off of her, even when he was looking at someone else. Nia stood very still inside that jacket. It was warm. It smelled like cedar and something else she couldn't name, and she was having the profoundly disorienting experience of being simultaneously more protected and more confused than she had been at any point in the last 20 minutes. The wine on her dress had soaked through to her skin and was beginning to feel cold and unpleasant at the edges, and she had approximately 47 questions, none of which she was going to ask right now in this ballroom, in front of these people. She looked at the side of Roman D'Angelo's face. She had, in fact, met him 4 months ago, in a context so far removed from chandeliers and charity galas that it took her a full 3 seconds of standing in this ballroom to connect the man descending that staircase to the man she'd sat across from in a very ordinary conference room in a building on West Washington Street with bad overhead lighting and a water-stained ceiling tile and a conversation that had changed the direction of her life in ways she still hadn't fully measured. But she had not told anyone about that meeting. Not Marcus. Not Denise. Not anyone. Because the thing she had found, the thing that had sent her to that meeting in the first place, was not something you talked about casually. And the people whose names appeared in the documents she'd found were not people you discussed with coworkers over lunch. The Harrow name had appeared in 3 of those documents. She looked at Celeste, then at Vivienne, and she understood, with the particular cold clarity of someone who has spent months assembling a picture and just found the last piece, exactly why Roman D'Angelo was in this ballroom tonight. Celeste had recovered enough to try again. Roman. Her voice had changed register entirely softer now. more practiced, the specific social frequency of someone who had grown up using personal warmth as a form of leverage. Whatever connection you think you have here, I want you to know that this woman was causing a disruption. She was standing in a ballroom, Roman said. Flat. No inflection, no particular heat. Just the words, placed down in front of Celeste like a document that didn't require interpretation. Celeste stopped, restarted. The server dropped his tray and I watched it happen, Roman said. From up there. He didn't gesture toward the balcony. He didn't need to. I've been up there for 40 minutes. The auburn-haired woman in the green dress took one quiet, careful step backward. Then another. Nia watched her do it with a peripheral attention. She was rationing carefully between the multiple things happening at once in this room. Celeste's eyes moved up toward the balcony and back down. Something moved across her face, not guilt exactly, not remorse, but something in the neighborhood. The specific expression of someone realizing that the thing they did thinking they were unobserved was in fact observed. That doesn't change, she started. Stop, Vivian said. It was one word, directed at Celeste, and Celeste stopped. The dynamic between them was so immediate and so complete that several people nearby visibly clocked it, the way Celeste's entire posture changed when her mother spoke. Not fear exactly, something more complicated. The years-long sediment of a particular kind of mother-daughter relationship where the daughter had learned very early that performance was required and deviation from the performance had costs. Vivienne looked at Roman. Whatever you saw, she said steady, measured. I think we can agree that this doesn't need to become an event. This was a misunderstanding. A social Vivian. Roman's voice had gone very quiet, which Nia was beginning to understand was not a good sign for the person he was speaking to. Do you want to finish that sentence? Vivian did not finish that sentence. 3 feet to Nia's left, the young security guard was having what appeared to be a small internal crisis. His hands was still in the vicinity of the position it had been in when he was walking toward Nia, not quite extended, not quite retracted. Frozen in the particular purgatory of someone who had been given an instruction by one form of authority and was now in the presence of a different form of authority and had absolutely no training for adjudicating between them. Nia looked at him. He looked at her. She gave him the smallest possible nod, not dismissive, not cruel. Just the nod of someone saying it's okay. You can stand down. Nobody's going to hold this against you, specifically, and something in his face loosened enough that his hand dropped to his side. 4 months, Celeste said again. She'd been working on this. Nia could tell, turning it over, trying to find the angle. You said you've known her 4 months. I've never seen her with you anywhere. I've never heard your name connected to. She looked at Nia with an expression that was halfway between contempt and something was surprised to identify as genuine unease. Her. That was intentional, Roman said. Why? He didn't answer that. He turned to Nia instead. And here was the thing that nobody in the room expected. Nia could see it in their collective posture, the subtle lean-in, the paused exhalations. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't do the performed concern of someone managing a situation. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her in that conference room on West Washington Street 4 months ago, when she'd put a folder of photocopied documents on the table between them and said, simply, I think something is very wrong with where the foundation's money is going, and I think your companies are being used as part of it. And I don't know if that means you're involved, or if it means someone is using your name without your knowledge, but I need you to know. He had looked at her then, the same way he was looking at her now, like she was the most important person in the room. Not because she was beautiful, not because she had power, because she had done something that most people, when confronted with the same information, the same circumstances, simply would not have done. You okay? 2 words. Not for the room. I'm fine, Nia said, which was not entirely true. Her dress was ruined, and her left ankle hurt, and she was standing in the middle of a charity gala, surrounded by recording phones and confused billionaires, while wearing a man's jacket and holding a laminated seating chart, but it was true enough in the way that mattered. Roman held her gaze for 1 more second. Then he turned back to the room, and the temperature dropped. I need everyone's attention, he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room organized itself around his words, the way water organizes itself, around a stone dropped into it. I want the attorneys in the building to come forward, he said. Specifically, the attorneys representing any of the Harrow Foundation's board partnerships. Nothing happened for a moment. Then a man near the east wall, 60-ish, silver-haired, the kind of face that belonged in old photographs of important committees, straightened his tie and began a very slow, very reluctant movement toward the center of the room. He was followed, after a pause, by two others. Celeste watched this happening with the expression of someone watching a car accident from inside the car. Roman, Vivienne said, and her voice had changed again. The careful register was gone, and underneath it was something rawer. Whatever you think you have, whatever she told you, she landed with a particular weight, directed not at Roman but toward Nia, carrying in its single syllable an entire architecture of dismissal. I can assure you that the Foundation's finances are thoroughly audited and entirely. I know they're audited, Roman said. I've read the audits. I've also read what wasn't in the audits. The silver-haired attorney stopped walking. Vivienne's composure did something Nia hadn't seen it do in 2 years of working adjacent to the Harrow name. Cracked, not shattered, not collapsed, just cracked. A hairline fracture across the surface of 61 years of cultivated unshakability. It was visible for approximately 1.5 seconds before Vivienne Harrow sealed it back up. But those 1.5 seconds were witnessed by everyone in the immediate circle, and the circle had grown. You have no idea, Vivienne said quietly, what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Roman said. You're going to damage relationships you have spent years building, she said. You're going to walk into a legal situation that you cannot control based on documented evidence, Roman said. 18 months of it. The words landed in the room with a weight that was almost physical. Nia watched Celeste's hand tighten on the stem of her champagne glass until her knuckles went white. That's not Celeste started. Celeste. Vivienne's voice cut across her daughter's with the clean efficiency of a blade. Be quiet. Celeste's mouth closed. The three attorneys who had come forward were standing in a loose, uncomfortable cluster, visibly wishing they were anywhere else. The silver-haired one had his arms crossed, a posture Nia recognized as someone performing confidence they no longer fully felt. The other two were young. One of them was actually sweating. She could see it under the chandelier light on his forehead. Roman reached into the inside pocket of the suit jacket he was no longer wearing, which was currently on Nia's shoulders, and stopped. Looked down at himself. A brief pause. He looked at Nia. She looked back at him. She understood. She reached into the inside pocket carefully, feeling the stiffness of folded paper, and drew out a single folded document. She handed it to him without a word. He unfolded it and held it toward the silver-haired attorney. I'd like you to look at this, Roman said. The attorney didn't move for a moment. Then, he crossed the remaining distance between them, took the paper with the careful hands of someone handling something they already suspected might burn them, and read it. The room waited. The attorney looked up from the paper. His expression had gone through several distinct phases in the 10 seconds of reading: confusion, recognition, and then something settled into the very particular blankness of a man who has just understood that the ground beneath a situation he thought he controlled has shifted significantly. Where did you get this? He said. Does it matter? Roman said. It matters considerably from a legal standpoint? Roman said. Yes, and my legal team has been very thorough about that. Would you like to speak with them? They're outside. Another pause. Longer this time. You brought your legal team, Vivienne said. Not a question. The flat acknowledgement of someone understanding too late the full architecture of what they had walked into. I brought my legal team, Roman confirmed, and investigators from 2 independent forensic accounting firms, and representatives from the Foundation's independent oversight board. He paused. They've been outside for about 40 minutes. I was going to wait until after the Vdisa service to bring them in. But his eyes moved to Nia's wine-stained dress, and something in his jaw tightened again. The timeline moved. Celeste's champagne glass hit the table. Not thrown set down, but hard, with the vibration of someone exerting enormous effort not to throw it. The remaining champagne sloshed but didn't spill. This is she started, and her voice had lost the performance entirely. What was left was rawer and younger, and more frightened than anything Nia had heard from her all evening. This is insane. This is you came here tonight to do this? You set this up? I came here tonight to present evidence to the appropriate parties, Roman said. In a controlled setting, with legal oversight. You came to humiliate us, Celeste said. Something moved across Roman's face. It wasn't quite a smile, and it wasn't quite contempt. It was the expression of someone making a very conscious choice about what to do with a deeply ironic moment. Celeste, he said quietly, look at her dress. The room looked at Nia. She let them look. She had stopped trying to control her face 20 minutes ago, not because she'd given up on composure, but because there was something her mother had told her, once, something she'd been turning over in her mind for the last several months, about the difference between composure and concealment. Composure is knowing what you feel and standing in it anyway, Loretta had said. Concealment is pretending you don't feel anything, so other people are comfortable. One of those is strength. The other one is just loneliness with good posture. Nia felt what she felt. She stood in it. The room looked at her red wine-stained dress and Roman D'Angelo's jacket on her shoulders, and the seating chart still in her hand, and the silence had a different quality now than it had 60 seconds ago. Celeste opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time all evening she looked genuinely her age. It was Vivian who spoke next, and she spoke not to the room but to Roman quietly, with the particular directness of someone who has decided that the performance is over, and the only remaining option is to negotiate. What do you want? She said. I want the ballroom doors open, Roman said. I want the investigators brought in. I want your legal team and my legal team in the same room with the evidence. And I want the Foundation's board notified tonight. And if we don't cooperate, Vivian said. The evidence exists whether you cooperate or not, Roman said. Cooperating just means you have some control over how the next part happens. Not cooperating means you don't. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. Nia watched the calculation happen in real time, across Vivian Harrow's face, the weighing, the measuring, the 61 years of tactical intelligence processing this situation for every angle, every exit, every possible leverage point. She was watching someone who had built an empire out of exactly this kind of high-stakes problem-solving try to find a way through a wall that had no doors in it. She didn't find one. Celeste, Vivian said. Celeste looked at her mother. Don't say anything else tonight, Vivian said. Not one more word. I mean it. Celeste's face crumpled. Not into tears. Celeste Harrow, Nia suspected, had not cried in a context where someone might see her in a very long time, but into something adjacent to it, something that was the emotional equivalent of a structure losing its load-bearing wall. Performance was gone. The social armor was gone. And what was underneath was just a 34-year-old woman who had spent her whole life doing what her mother told her and was beginning to understand, in this ballroom, that her mother might have been building something that was going to fall on both of them. The ballroom doors opened, not dramatically, not with fanfare. They just opened, the way heavy doors open when someone with a key has been waiting outside them for 40 minutes for exactly this signal. 3 people came in first, then 2 more. Then a woman in a gray suit, carrying a briefcase that she set on the nearest table, someone who efficiency, with the quiet of someone who has done this kind of thing before and does not need to perform the gravity of it for an audience. The room reorganized itself again, guests moving back, creating space, some of them already reaching for their phones, in a different way now, not to record humiliation, but to make calls. Nia could see 3 or 4 people near the perimeter of the room, having urgent, quiet conversations into their phones, with the body language of people putting significant distance between themselves and something. The Harrow name, she understood, was already beginning to mean something different than it had an hour ago. The silver-haired attorney had moved to speak with someone from Roman's legal team, their voices low and clipped, and from his posture, Nia could see that he had made a quiet, rapid decision about which side of this situation he wanted to be standing on. One of the younger attorneys had his phone out and appeared to be composing a text message with the focused, slightly panicked energy of someone contacting their own firm. Celeste stood at the center of it all and said nothing, because her mother had told her not to, and because for perhaps the first time in 34 years, she genuinely did not know what to say. Vivian, to her credit, did not crumble. She stood with her arms folded and her chin up, watching the investigators move through her fundraising gala like someone watching floodwater come through a door they'd been pretending wouldn't open. Her face had gone very still, not peaceful still. The stillness of someone exerting enormous effort to maintain the only thing they had left, which was dignity, because the rest of it was already leaving the room. Nia watched all of this from where she stood. Roman came back to her side. He didn't explain himself. He didn't lay out the situation or apologize for the evenings, or ask her any of the things that people ask when they're looking for reassurance that they've done the right thing. He just stood beside her, the way he had in that conference room 4 months ago after. She'd put the documents on the table, and he'd read through them and looked up at her and said, not with relief, not with alarm, but with a very calm, very specific kind of gravity. You understand what you've done by bringing this to me. And Nia had said, yes, because she did. She'd been sitting with the weight of it for 6 weeks, before she walked into that building on West Washington Street, and she had made the decision with full knowledge of what it might cost her, because the alternative was to put the documents back in the filing cabinet and go home and pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. And pretending she hadn't seen what she'd seen was not something she was capable of doing. Not because she was noble, because she was her mother's daughter, and Nia Caldwell had raised her in the specific and non-negotiable belief that knowing something wrong is happening and choosing silence makes you part of what's wrong. You're shaking, Roman said quietly. I'm cold, Nia said, which was partially true. He didn't argue with her. We'll need you to speak with the investigators tonight, he said. Your testimony about what you found and how. It'll take a couple of hours. I know, Nia said. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. I'm going to. A pause. All right, he said. There was a commotion near the east wall. Not violent, nothing loud, but a sudden sharpening of energy in a corner of the room that drew Nia's attention. One of the investigators' young woman, dark suit, the specific posture of someone who carries authority without broadcasting it, had approached the cluster of guests that included 2 men Nia recognized from the Foundation's board of directors. Both men were now engaged in rapid, low-voiced conversation with her, and the body language of the exchange was distinctly one-directional. The investigator spoke, they listened, their faces doing complicated things. One of them looked across the room at Nia. She met his eyes. He looked away first. That was when Vivian moved. Not toward Roman, not toward the investigators, toward Nia. She crossed the 12 feet of marble floor between them, with the particular steadiness of someone who has decided on a course of action and is committed to it. And she stopped in front of Nia at a distance of about 3 feet, close enough for the exchange to be private, far enough to not be physically threatening, and she looked at her with an expression Nia had never seen on Vivian Harrow's face before. It wasn't the clinical assessment from earlier in the evening. It wasn't anger or contempt or the practiced warmth Vivian deployed in photographs with large donation checks. It was the expression of someone looking at the actual thing that is destroying them, up close, trying to understand it. You have a daughter? Vivian said. Her voice was very quiet. Nia blinked. No, a family. People who Vivian paused. Pause cost her something visibly. You understand that what you've done tonight doesn't just affect me. It affects people who depend on Vivienne. Roman's voice, from Nia's left, quiet and final as a door closing. Vivienne stopped. Don't, he said. It was one word. It contained everything, a warning, a refusal, the complete closure of that particular line of approach. Vivienne looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Nia once more, and what was in her eyes then was not a threat. Nia had braced for a threat and recognized, with something like vertigo, that it wasn't one. It was something worse than a threat. It was a look that said, I see you. I actually see you finally, and I understand that I made a catastrophic error in not seeing you sooner, and that error is going to cost me everything I built, and I need you to know that I know. Then she walked back across the marble floor, stopped beside her daughter, and put one hand on Celeste's arm. And something about that gesture, so small, so privately human, a mother's hand on her daughter's arm, in the middle of the wreckage they'd built together, hit Nia somewhere she hadn't expected. She didn't feel triumph. She hadn't expected to feel triumph. But she also hadn't expected this, the complicated, heavy thing in her chest that was not victory and not sorrow exactly, but something in between them. The feeling of being the person who brought down the walls and having to stand in the rubble and recognize that rubble is still rubble even when the building deserved to fall. Stood in it. The same way she'd stood in the wine, in the laughter, in the humiliation 20 minutes ago that felt like a year. Roman spoke quietly beside her. You ready? She looked at the room, at the investigators and the attorneys and the guests who had rearranged themselves into the social topography of catastrophe. At Celeste and Vivienne, standing together against the far wall, not speaking. At the young waiter, she noticed, who had slipped back in through a side door and was quietly, carefully, finishing collecting the silverware from the floor. Nobody was watching him. Nobody laughed at him. He was just a young man cleaning up a mess, doing his job, invisible in the way that most people are invisible most of the time. Nia pulled Roman's jacket a little closer around her shoulders. Yes, she said. Then let's go, he said, and they walked across the ballroom floor together, not holding hands. Not performing anything, just two people moving toward the investigators with the specific posture of individuals who have something to account for and have decided a long time ago to count for it fully. Behind them, Celeste Harrow made a sound. Not words. Not a threat. Just a sound raw and small and broken in a way that probably no one in that room had ever heard from her before, the kind of sound that comes out of a person when the life they built is visibly ending and there is nothing left to say about it. Vivienne's hand tightened on her daughter's arm. She did not look at Nia again, but Nia heard that sound. She heard it, and she carried it with her across the marble floor, into the cluster of gray-suited investigators, into the next hours of testimony and documents, and the long, exhausting process of telling the truth to people with the authority to act on it. She carried it not as guilt she had examined, guilt carefully, in the weeks before that meeting on West Washington Street, and what she found was that guilt required her to have done something wrong, and she had not done anything wrong. Carried it as weight, because that was what accountability actually felt like, when you were the one holding it, not triumphant, not simple, heavy, real, and hers to carry all the way to the end. The investigator in the gray suit opened the briefcase and spread the first set of documents across the table, and the numbers on those documents were the same numbers Nia had found 6 weeks before she walked into that building on West Washington Street. 6 weeks of carrying them alone. 6 weeks of knowing what they meant and what it would cost to tell someone. And now they were on a table in a ballroom in the Meridian Hotel on Michigan Avenue, and there was no version of tonight where they went back into a filing cabinet. The investigator looked up at her. Miss Caldwell, she said. Let's start from the beginning. Nia sat down. She put the laminated seating chart on the table beside the documents she'd been carrying it this whole time without realizing it. Through the wine and the laughter and the jacket and all of it, and she looked at the numbers that had started all of this, and she took a breath. The first hour was almost manageable. Nia sat across from the investigator in the gray suit, whose name turned out to be Dana Reyes, forensic accountant, contracted by Roman's legal team through a third-party firm with no direct connection to either D'Angelo business interests or the Harrow Foundation, and she walked through everything methodically. How she'd found the first discrepancy, which file it was in, what she'd done with that information, and then what she'd done with the next piece and the next, building it the way you build something. When you don't know you're building anything yet, thinking each individual thing is just an error, an oversight, a number that got transposed by someone tired at the end of a long quarter. It took her 3 weeks to stop telling herself that. Dana Reyes was good at her job in the specific way that made her almost invisible while she worked. She took notes without looking at them, asked questions that sounded casual and weren't. and had the quality of someone who had spent years in rooms with people who were either lying or afraid, and had learned to tell the difference without appearing to try. She put documents on the table in a particular order that Nia realized, after 20 minutes, was not the order Nia had described them, but a different order, a more revealing order. The sequence of someone who already understood the shape of what they were looking at and was confirming it rather than discovering it. Roman sat at the far end of the table. He had his own documents in front of him and was in low conversation with a man in a dark suit, one of his attorneys. Niger presumed, and occasionally he glanced in her direction with the specific quality of attention that wasn't checking on her, but was simply tracking. The way you track a situation you're responsible for, without making the person at the center of it feel monitored. She appreciated that. She didn't say so. The ballroom around them had reorganized itself again. Most of the gala guests had left, some voluntarily, some, after being asked to provide contact information by the investigators, some in the hasty and slightly undignified way of people who had done the rapid calculation that being present at this particular event for any longer than necessary was not going to look good for them in subsequent weeks. The catering staff had mostly retreated to the kitchen corridor, although Nia caught glimpses of them occasionally through the swinging doors, faces appearing and disappearing, curious and cautious. The way people watch something significant happening from a safe distance. The string quartet was gone. Their chairs sat empty near the east wall, with the abandoned quality of furniture that had been part of a different evening. Celeste and Vivienne were no longer in the ballroom. Nia didn't know when they'd left. She'd been focused on Dana Reyes and the documents when it happened, and by the time she looked up and noticed their absence, the space where they'd been standing felt like a held breath that had finally been released. She should have paid attention to that. She should have noticed that Vivienne Harrow leaving quietly was a different thing than Vivienne Harrow conceding. She didn't notice it yet. At the 90-minute mark, Donna Reyes set down her pen, aligned it precisely with the edge of her notepad, and said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." Nia looked at her. "Okay, the transfer records from the third quarter, the ones routed through the Lakeview Community Trust disbursements." Dana put a specific page on the table between them and tapped it once, lightly, with one finger. "You said you found these in the secondary archives. The physical files." "Yes, and you copied them yourself." "The photocopies you gave to Mr. D'Angelo." "Yes." Dana was quiet for a moment. She looked at the page. "These copies have a timestamp in the upper right corner. Very faint, you'd miss it if you weren't looking. But it's there." She turned the page so Nia could see it. "That timestamp is from the Foundation's internal document management system. It's generated automatically when a file is accessed digitally." Nia frowned. "I told you I pulled the physical files from the archive room on the third floor." "I understand that's what you believe," Dana said. The phrasing landed wrong. "That's what happened," Nia said. "I was in that room. I physically pulled the folders. I have the access log from the archive room sign-in sheet, my name, the date, the time." "I've seen the sign-in sheet," Dana said. "Your name is there." A pause. "The folders you describe are also there. The physical folders." She paused again, and this pause had a different weight than the others. "But these pages didn't come from those folders, Miss Caldwell. These pages were printed from the digital system." "Timestamp doesn't lie about that." Nia stared at her. "I copied them by hand," she said. "Photocopied them. In the copy room down the hall from the archives. I know what I did." "I believe you know what you think you did," Des said carefully. That's Nia stopped. The beginning of something cold was moving through her chest. Not fear, not yet. Something more disorienting than fear. The feeling of standing on ground you were certain was solid and feeling it shift. "What are you saying?" Dana looked at her steadily. "I'm saying that the documents you provided to Mr. D'Angelo, the ones that form the core of the evidentiary package we've been working with for 3 months, have metadata that doesn't match your account of how you obtained them." The room felt different suddenly. Nia was aware with sudden and uncomfortable precision of every person in it. Dana Reyes across the table. Roman at the far end, who had stopped talking to his attorney and was watching. Two other investigators near the window. The attorney with the silver hair, who was on his phone with his back to the room, but whose posture had the quality of someone listening in two directions at once. Someone altered the documents, Nia said. That's one possibility, Dana said. What's the other possibility? Dana didn't answer. And Nia understood with a cold and absolute clarity what the other possibility was. The other possibility was that the documents had been fabricated, created digitally, and given to her in a way that made her believe she'd found them herself. The other possibility was that someone had constructed an evidence trail and walked her into it, using her credibility, her access, her genuine belief in what she'd found as the vehicle for delivering manufactured proof into the hands of someone with the resources to act on it. The other possibility was that Nia Caldwell had not blown the whistle on anything. She had been the whistle. No, she said, Miss Caldwell. No. She pushed her chair back, not violently, with the controlled energy of someone who needs physical space to think. I found those documents. I was in that archive room. I have gone over this in my head. I've gone over it so many times that I can tell you what the overhead light sounded like in that room, that particular buzzing fluorescent sound. I can tell you that the folder had a coffee ring stain on the tab. I can tell you that the photocopy machine jammed on the third page, and I had to clear the paper tray. This was not, I didn't imagine this. I'm not suggesting you imagined it, Dana said. Her voice was careful, in the way of someone navigating a situation that has become significantly more complicated than they expected. I'm telling you what the metadata shows. That's all I'm able to tell you right now. Nia looked down the table at Roman. He was looking back at her. His face had gone very still, not the controlled stillness from earlier in the evening, but something more internal, the stillness of someone processing, something that has altered the landscape of a situation they thought they understood. Did you know about this? She said. The question came out more direct than she intended, and with more heat. She didn't retract it. Roman didn't look away. No. You had 3 months with those documents. Your people went through them. My people looked for corroboration, he said. They found it. They didn't look for metadata inconsistencies, because there was no reason to look for metadata inconsistencies. There's a reason now, Nia said. Yes, he said. There is. She stood up. The jacket, his jacket, still around her shoulders. She pulled it off and set it on the table between them. She didn't think about whether that gesture meant something. She just needed her arms free. Someone set me up, she said. The room was quiet. Someone put those documents where I would find them, constructed them in a way that made them look like physical records when they were digital prints, waited for me to do exactly what I did find them, copy them, take them somewhere, and used me to deliver manufactured evidence to. She stopped, looked at Roman. The thought arrived fully formed and awful. To you, she said. The silence in the room shifted quality entirely. Roman's attorney, the one he'd been talking to, moved slightly, a small repositioning of his body that carried in it the specific awareness of someone who has just identified the moment a situation becomes dangerous. Nia, Roman said. Someone needed the evidence to reach you specifically, she said, and she could hear herself working through it in real time, her voice carrying the quality of thought that hadn't finished arriving yet, the words coming out slightly ahead of the complete picture. Not law enforcement, you. Someone who had the resources and the motivation to act on it without going through channels that could be slowed down or buried. Someone who would move fast and move hard and create exactly this, she gestured at the room. The investigators, the documents spread across the table, this whole situation. Tonight. That doesn't mean the underlying fraud isn't real, Dana said. She had her pen in her hand again. The metadata inconsistency flags a problem with the chain of custody for these specific documents. It doesn't invalidate the entire case. We have corroborating records from 3 other sources. Then why does it matter? Nia said. If you have corroboration. Because in a legal proceeding, Dana said carefully, if the primary documents can be challenged on authenticity, it creates an opening. Defense attorneys look for openings. A metadata inconsistency in the core evidentiary package is not a small problem. Nia absorbed this. She sat back down, not because she felt calmer, because her legs needed the chair. Who knew you had the documents? Roman said. His voice was quiet, Very controlled. The control of someone managing something they don't fully have the shape of, yet. Nobody, Nia said. After you found them. Before you came to me. Who did you talk to? Nobody, she said again. Nobody at the foundation? Nobody at home? You didn't tell a friend, mention something, ask anyone for. I didn't tell anyone, Nia said. I've been alone with this for 6 weeks before I came to you. I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't know who I could tell. I didn't know if you were involved. I didn't know if the foundation's board was involved. I didn't know how far it went. The only thing I knew was what was in those files, and she stopped. Something had snagged in her memory. She went back over it. Carefully. The archive room, the folders, the copy machine that jammed. The walk back to her desk. The folder she'd put inside her desk drawer, underneath the quarterly report she'd been working on. Her desk. My desk, she said. Roman looked at her. Put the copies in my desk drawer for 2 days, before I moved them, she said. I locked the drawer. I have the only key. She paused. Except that's not true. Building Services has a master key. And Marcus has a management key for the department. It's for emergency access. It was in the policy handbook when I started. I almost never thought about it. Marcus Delaney, Roman said. Nia's stomach dropped. Marcus, who had been flustered in his too small tuxedo at the entrance to the kitchen corridor. Marcus, who had practically begged her to come tonight. Marcus, who texted her at 8:47 about the silent auction bed sheets, which got her moving through that specific section of the ballroom, at exactly the time Celeste Harrow was standing there with her friends and her champagne. He knew I'd found something, Nia said. Her voice had gone strange, flat in a way she didn't recognize. He asked me about it. About a month before I came to you. He asked me if I'd noticed anything unusual in the Q3 disbursement records. He framed it as routine, like he was just checking in on my work, and I said no, because I wasn't ready to say yes to anyone yet. But he asked. He asked specifically about the Q3 records, Roman said. Yes. Roman looked at his attorney. Something passed between them that Nia couldn't fully decode, but which had the quality of an entire conversation happening at accelerated speed in a shared language built from previous conversations she hadn't been part of. I need his name run tonight, Roman said to the attorney. The attorney was already on his phone. Dana Reyes had been writing. She set her pen down again the second time she'd done that, and Nia was beginning to understand it as a tell. The action of someone pausing because what they've just heard has changed the document they're building. If Delaney had access to your desk and knew what you'd found, the question is why? What would his interest be in ensuring that evidence reached Mr. D'Angelo specifically? Unless his interest wasn't D'Angelo, the silver-haired attorney said. Everyone looked at him. He had turned around at some point, Nia wasn't sure exactly when, and was no longer on his phone. He was standing with his arms at his sides, and his expression carried the specific quality of someone who has decided to step out from behind the cover they've been standing behind all evening. I'm sorry? Dana said. The interest might not have been in what Roman did with the evidence, the silver-haired attorney said. The interest might have been in what Roman did with her. He looked at Nia. If D'Angelo is publicly associated with a whistleblower whose documents have compromised authenticity, if he's visibly championing a case that subsequently collapses on an evidentiary technicality, the reputational and legal exposure for his organization is significant. The room absorbed this. Nia felt something move through her that she had no good word for. It was the sensation of understanding arriving in pieces, each piece slightly worse than the one before it. The picture assembling itself with the particular cruelty of clarity. They used me to get to him, she said. Not a question. That would be the theory, the silver-haired attorney said. If the fraud documentation is real and separate from the chain of custody issue, there's strong reason to believe the underlying fraud is real. Then someone with psychology of it decided that the efficient way to neutralize D'Angelo's ability to act on it was to construct a delivery mechanism that would subsequently discredit both the evidence and the person who brought it to him. They wanted him to do exactly what he did tonight, Roman said. Nia looked at him. They wanted me to walk into this ballroom, he said, with what I believed was a solid evidentiary case, and expose myself publicly. Make myself visible. Put my name and my organization's resources on record as backing a case that they could then challenge on grounds that were already prepared. His jaw was tight. Whoever constructed this, they knew I'd act on it. They built for it. They knew your pattern, his attorney said. Yes, Roman said. Quiet. Very quiet. Who knows your pattern well enough to build something like this? Dana asked. Roman didn't answer right away. When he did, he said one name, and the room went still in a different way than it had gone. Still all evening, not the collective held breath of a crowd witnessing drama, but the specific silence of a small group of people facing a problem that has just become significantly larger than it was 10 seconds ago. He said the name, and Nia didn't recognize it. But she recognized what happened to every other person in that room when they heard it: the attorney's face, the way Dana's hand tightened on her pen, the almost imperceptible straightening of posture that indicated people bracing for something. Say that again, Dana said. Roman said the name again. That's Dana stopped, looked at her notes, looked up. That's one of the Foundation's major donor partners. They're listed in the Q3 records. They're one of the sources we were going to use as corroboration. I know, Roman said. If they constructed the primary documents, then the corroboration therein was also constructed to be found, Roman said. It was built to look like independent confirmation. It isn't. It's the same source, routed through a different channel. Nia put her hands flat on the table. She needed the solid surface under her palms. She needed something that wasn't moving. The whole thing, she said. The whole evidentiary package may be compromised, Dana said. Or may be completely real, with a deliberately corrupted chain of custody designed to make it appear compromised in court, Roman's attorney said. Those are two very different problems. Either way, Nia said, we go into any legal proceeding with documentation that can be challenged at its foundation. Yes, Dana said. And Vivian Harrow's attorneys already know this, Nia said. No one said anything, which was itself an answer. Nia stood up again. She walked to the far end of the table, not toward Roman, just away from the chair, needing movement, needing the 3 feet of distance between where she'd been sitting and the wall, because the wall was solid and she needed something solid near her. She thought about Marcus in his too small tuxedo, the way he'd texted her at 8:47, the specific time, specific enough that she'd been crossing exactly that section of the ballroom at exactly the moment Celeste was there. The wine on her dress, the phones going up, the recording. The humiliation tonight, she said. That wasn't random. No one answered. They were all looking at her. Celeste humiliating me in front of cameras, that was planned, she said. Or at least it was facilitated. Someone made sure I was in that part of the room at that time, made sure Celeste was there, made sure there were phones ready. Because they needed footage of Roman D'Angelo defending me publicly. They needed the moment to exist so it could be used. She paused. When he put his jacket on my shoulders, on camera. With 40 phones recording, it created a documented public association, Dana said slowly. Between a man with a legally complicated reputation and a whistleblower with evidence that can be challenged, Nia said. Before any of it goes to court, before any of it even formally reaches law enforcement. She turned to look at Roman. Every story tomorrow morning ties your name to compromised documents. Whether the fraud is real or not doesn't matter at that stage. The story is already written. Roman was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. It was not, she realized, the calm command of someone managing a situation. It was the particular stillness of someone who has just recognized they've been outplayed and is sitting with that recognition without flinching from it. The recording, he said. Yes, she said, it's already out. She hadn't thought about that. She thought about it now. 40 phones. The moment he'd crossed the ballroom floor and put his jacket around her shoulders, the most visible, most legible, most share-ready moment of the entire evening. That footage had been circulating for 90 minutes while they sat at this table. We need to move, Roman's attorney said. We need more than that, Roman said. He looked at Dana. Can you establish the authentic origin of the fraud, independent of the documents? With time, Dana said. Significant time. and it would require access to records that are currently. Get them, Roman said. Some of those records are held by institutions that will require legal process too. Get them, he said again, not louder, just more final. Dana looked at him for a moment, then at Nia, then back at her notepad. She picked up her pen. I need to make calls, she said. Several of them. Tonight. Use the room, Roman said. Dana gathered her materials efficiently and moved toward the far end of the ballroom, already with her phone in her hand, already dialing, before she'd fully cleared the table. The silver-haired attorney Nia still didn't know his name. She realized she'd been in this room with him for 90 minutes and didn't know his name, looked between Roman and Nia and said, carefully, I think we need to discuss what public statement, if any, is made before morning. No statement tonight, Roman said. With respect, the footage. I know what the footage is doing, Roman said. No statement. Not until we know what we actually have. The attorney looked like he wanted to argue. He didn't, and then Nia's phone rang. It was on the table where she'd set it when they sat down, face up, and they all saw the name on the screen at the same time. Marcus. The phone rang in the ballroom with the specific, jarring quality of a sound that doesn't belong to the room it's in. Nia looked at it. She looked at Roman. She looked at the name on the screen, calling her at 11:30 at night, from a man who had begged her to come to this gala, who had texted her at 8:47 to cross a specific section of a ballroom, who had known she'd found something in the Q3 records 6 weeks before she'd told anyone. Her hand moved toward the phone. Don't answer it, Roman's attorney said. I know, Nia said. She watched it ring 4 times. 5. The voicemail picked up, and for a moment the room was quiet again with the particular quality of aftermath, the silence of people in a small, lit room who have just understood that the thing they've been building in the dark for months has been seen, the whole time, by someone they trusted without examining whether trust was warranted. The notification appeared. Voicemail. Nia stared at it. He knows, she said. He knows we're still here. He knows how tonight went. Someone told him. She paused, or he was watching. The building has cameras, Roman said. She hadn't thought about the cameras. He works for the foundation, she said. He has access to the building systems. He could have been watching the whole thing from wherever he is right now. She paused. Called to see if I'd pick up, to see what I'd do. She looked at Roman. He's trying to figure out if I know. Let him figure, Roman said. For how long? Long enough for Dana to find what she needs, and for my people to run his name through everything they have. He paused. Don't call him back. Don't text him. Don't give him anything he can read. Nia looked at the voicemail notification. What if the voicemail? Don't listen to it, Roman said. If he says something incriminating. Anything incriminating in that voicemail was put there deliberately, his attorney said. He knows we might use it. Don't give him the satisfaction of us building on something he handed us. Nia pulled her phone off the table and turned it face down. She breathed. In, through her nose, out through her mouth, the specific breathing pattern her mother had taught her for the moments when panic arrived and you needed to keep your hands steady enough to think. Loretta had called it the breath of someone who knows the situation isn't over. Not the breath of calm, the breath of continuation. She breathed it. Across the room, Dana Reyes was speaking rapidly into her phone, in a low, urgent voice. Roman was in conversation with his attorney again, their heads together over something on a tablet, and the quality of their conversation had changed. The slow, deliberate cadence of earlier in the evening was gone, replaced by something tighter and faster, the verbal rhythm of people managing a problem that is actively moving. Nia looked at the document still spread on the table, in front of where she'd been sitting. The numbers that had started all of this. The numbers she'd found in a room with a buzzing fluorescent light and a folder with a coffee ring stain on the tab. The numbers she'd carried alone for 6 weeks, examining them at her kitchen table at night, cross-referencing them against public financial records, building the picture piece by piece until it was undeniable. She knew what she'd found. She knew the fraud was real. She knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had held the actual documents in their actual hands and stood in the actual room where they were stored, that she had not been handed a fiction. Whatever someone had done to the metadata, whatever corrupted the chain of custody, Whatever game had been built around her, without her knowledge, the money was real, the theft was real, the numbers were real. The question now was whether she could prove it in a way that couldn't be dismantled before it reached anyone who could act on it. And the answer to that question, she understood, looking at Roman's attorney and Dana Reyes, and the half-empty room of a charity gala that had become something else. Entirely the answer was that she could not prove it alone. And she could not prove it through the channels she'd been using, and the person she'd trusted to help her might now be part of the problem. She needed something new. She needed something they hadn't anticipated. The thought arrived slowly, from somewhere that wasn't strategy, but wasn't quite instinct either, somewhere in between, the place where 2 years of watching, filing away, reading the subtext of every room she'd ever worked adjacent to, finally assembled itself into something usable. She thought about the Foundation's board, not the compromised members. She didn't know yet which ones were compromised. Though she had suspicions, she'd had suspicions for months. She thought about the one board member she'd interacted with, who had always carried the specific quality of someone who was there because they believed in the work rather than because the position served them. An older woman named Adeline Cruz, who had been on the Foundation's Independent Oversight Committee for 11 years, who asked questions at quarterly reviews that made Marcus visibly uncomfortable, who had once spent 45 minutes in Nia's office asking her detailed questions about the administrative procedures for processing grant disbursements, and then thanked her with a sincerity that didn't feel performed. Nia didn't know if Adeline Cruz was involved. She didn't know if anyone was truly clean. But she knew that Adeline Cruz had once pressed her business card into Nia's hand at the end of that 45-minute conversation and said, "If you ever see something that worries you, I mean really worries you, not just normal workplace concerns, call me." Not the Foundation line, my cell. Nia had that card. She had it in her apartment, in the drawer of her nightstand, because she'd put it there the evening of the day Adeline gave it to her and hadn't moved it since, treating it the way you treat something you hope you'll never need. She looked at her phone, face down on the table. She looked at Roman. "There's someone I need to call," she said. He looked at her. "Not through your channels," she said. "Not through your legal team. Someone independent. Someone who's been inside the Foundation long enough to know where the clean records actually are if they exist." She paused. "Someone who gave me her number a long time ago and told me to use it if I was ever really worried." "You were never really worried before tonight," Roman said. "I was worried before tonight," Nia said. "Tonight I'm something past worried." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Who is it?" she told him. Something shifted in Roman D'Angelo's face, a small recalibration, the expression of someone who has received information that doesn't fit where he expected it to land. "You know her," Nia said. It wasn't quite a question. "I know of her," he said. "She's been a problem for the Harrow board for years. They've been trying to remove her from the oversight committee for 3 years, and she keeps surviving it." "Because she's clean," Nia said. "Because she's careful," Roman said. Which isn't always the same thing. A pause. But in her case, he stopped. "Call her." Nia reached for her phone, turned it face up. Marcus's voicemail notifications still sat there on the screen. She moved past it, found the number she'd transferred from the card into her contacts 11 months ago, and never used, and pressed call. It rang twice. Then a voice she recognized, older, unhurried, carrying the specific quality of someone who picks up their phone at midnight without sounding like someone who has just been woken up, said, simply, "Nia Caldwell." Question, not surprise, like she'd been waiting. "Cruz," Nia said. "I heard there was some excitement at the gala tonight," Adeline Cruz said. Nia's hand tightened on the phone. "You heard," she said. "I've been hearing things for considerably longer than tonight," Adeline said. And then, with the particular directness of someone who has been waiting a long time to stop being careful, "I think it's time we talked about what I found in the physical archives 18 months ago, before someone went back and replaced the originals with." Adeline Cruz's voice on the phone had the quality of someone who had been sitting with a loaded sentence for a very long time and had finally found the right moment to put it down. Before someone went back and replaced the originals, with Nia started to repeat it, to make sure she'd heard correctly, and Adeline cut across her. "Not on the phone," she said. "Not for the rest of this." "Where are you?" "Still at the Meridian." "Good. Stay there." "I'm 20 minutes out." A pause that lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Is D'Angelo with you?" Nia looked at Roman across the table. "Yes. Tell him I'm coming. Tell him I have the originals." Another pause. "Tell him I've had them for 14 months. The call ended. Nia lowered the phone. The room had gone quiet in the way rooms go quiet when everyone in them has heard enough of one side of a conversation to understand that the other side contains something significant, and they are all waiting, with varying degrees of patience, for someone to translate. "She's coming here," Nia said. "She says she has the original documents." She looked at Roman. "She says she's had them for 14 months. Roman's face did something very controlled and very brief. Then he looked at his attorney. The attorney was already on his feet. 14 months, the attorney said. "That's what she said." "That predates your discovery by 8 months, Nia said. "Yes. I know," she let that land. 8 months before Nia had ever walked into that archive room, Adeline Cruz had already found something and taken it out. Which meant the archive room Nia had searched was not the complete archive. Which meant whoever had gone back and manufactured the digital versions had done so, knowing or suspecting that someone had already accessed the real ones, and had constructed the replacement set specifically for the next person who came looking. For Nia, they knew someone would look again, she said. Eventually someone would look, so they prepared something for the next searcher to find. Something real enough to be convincing. Something that could be used and then challenged. She felt the shape of it now, the full architecture of it, and it was more deliberate and more cold-blooded than anything she'd allowed herself to imagine in the months she'd carried this alone. "They turned the archive into a trap, and you walked into it," Roman said. Not cruelly, just as a statement of what had happened. "And I walked into it," she said. Dana Reyes had come back to the table. She'd heard enough from the doorway. If Cruz has original physical documents, authenticated physical documents, verified chain of custody, that's a different evidentiary situation entirely. "How different?" Roman said. "Entirely different," Dana said. "Originals with provable handling history, held by an independent board member with legal standing and 11 years of documented Foundation oversight. That's not a chain of custody you can challenge on metadata grounds. That's primary source material." Roman stood up. The movement was sudden enough that everyone in the room tracked it. He stood, and he put both hands flat on the table, and he looked at the documents spread across it with the expression of someone doing rapid structural recalculation, pulling down what they thought they knew and rebuilding it on a different foundation with the speed that comes from years of making high-stakes decisions in compressed timeframes. "Marcus Delaney," he said. "Yes," his attorney said. He set up Nia to find the replacement documents. He knew about the original search he'd been watching for it, probably for months. Roman's jaw worked. Which means he knew Adeline had the originals, or suspected it. And he needed a second set of documents, in play documents, that would eventually be challenged to create noise around the real evidence. "To bury it," Nia said. "To make the whole evidentiary landscape look contaminated," Roman said. "There are 2 sets of documents, one of which is proven compromised. Defense attorneys argue the other set is equally suspect. Reasonable doubt applied at the source level, before a jury ever sees a number. That only works," the silver-haired attorney said slowly, "if Adeline Cruz never comes forward with the originals." Everyone looked at each other. "She's been sitting on them for 14 months, Roman's attorney said. "Why hasn't she come forward?" "Because she didn't know who to trust," Nia said. She said it with the specific certainty of someone recognizing their own experience in someone else's. The 6 weeks she'd spent alone with the copies. The weight of knowing something and not knowing who was safe to tell. The careful, exhausting calculation of every person. In the orbit of the thing you knew. Trying to determine who was clean and who wasn't, and whether you were even capable of making that determination accurately. Adeline Cruz had been doing that calculation for 14 months. She was waiting, Nia said, for someone she trusted to come to her first. For a signal that it was safe to move. She paused. "Called her," The room absorbed this. Then Roman's phone rang. He looked at the screen. His face went very still in the specific way. It went still when something bad arrived. He answered it, said nothing, listened for approximately 8 seconds. Then where? 4 more seconds. Don't move, I'm sending people now. He ended the call. What? His attorney said. Adeline Cruz's car was just run off the road on the Eisenhower, Roman said. She's alive. Car's in the ditch. She's not hurt, shaken. Minor stuff. But the people who did it are gone. He was already moving, reaching for his phone again, already dialing. She had a bag with her. They took the bag. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Nia stood up so fast her chair scraped the marble, and the sound was very loud in the silence. She started. The bag's gone, Roman said. The originals, I don't know yet what she had on her. He had the phone to his ear again. I need to talk to her directly. She called you? Nia said. My security team was tracking her when she left her building. I had people on her. He saw Nia's expression and said, quickly, not surveillance protection. I've had protection on the 3 people with independent foundation oversight access since last week. When I thought we were just dealing with financial fraud. You knew she might be a target, Nia said. I knew everyone adjacent to this evidence might be a target, Roman said. I didn't know she had the originals. Nobody told me she had the originals. He said it without accusation, but it landed with weight anyway. She didn't tell me either until 4 minutes ago, Nia said. I know. He turned away to speak into his phone, rapid and low. Nia looked at Dana Reyes. Dana looked back at her with the expression of someone who is very good at staying calm under pressure and is currently using every bit of that skill. If they took the originals, Nia said, then we're back to compromised documentation, Dana said. And they'll destroy them. Within the hour, I'd assume. Nia felt something move through her that was not panic. She was past the threshold, where panic was a useful response. It was something colder and more focused, the feeling of a situation collapsing toward its worst possible outcome in real time, and the recognition that the time available to stop it was measured in minutes. She looked at the phone in her hand. Marcus's voicemail was still there. She'd been told not to listen to it. Roman's attorney had been explicit. Anything Marcus had left there was placed deliberately, was bait, was constructed for her to build on. She'd agreed with that assessment when it was made. She still thought the assessment was probably correct. But she thought about Marcus, the way he operated. The specific texture of his incompetence, and she'd always known it was there, had been working around it for 2 years, had learned the particular shape of his limitations. Marcus was not a strategist. Marcus was a facilitator. Someone had given Marcus his role in this, and Marcus had executed it because Marcus always executed what he was given, if it kept him comfortable and adjacent to people with power. Marcus was not careful enough to leave a voicemail full of deliberate bait. Marcus would leave a voicemail that sounded like what Marcus thought a calm, innocent person sounded like, which would be deeply unconvincing in the way all of Marcus's performances were unconvincing once you knew what you were watching for. She pressed play. Roman's attorney said Nia sharply across the room. She held up one hand, not rudely, just the hand of someone who has made a decision. The voicemail played. Marcus's voice came through the speaker, and she'd been right. It had all the qualities of a man trying to sound casual in a moment of significant internal strain. The slight, over-measured pace of his words, the particular way he said her name, once at the beginning and once at the end, like bookends on something he'd rehearsed. Hey, Nia. Just I heard the evening got a little complicated. Just wanted to check in, make sure you're okay. Give me a call when you can. Hope everything's yeah. Call me. She played it again. Then she looked at Roman, who had finished his call and was watching her with the focused attention of someone has learned to let a situation develop before reacting to it. He said the evening got a little complicated, she said. He was watching the footage, Roman's attorney said. No, Nia said. He said complicated, not crazy, not wild. Not the words you'd use if you'd seen 30 seconds of viral footage from a charity gala and were calling a coworker to check in. Complicated is the word you use when you know what the complication actually is. She paused. He knows about the investigators. He knows about the documents. He's not checking in on me, he's checking on the situation. He wants to know if you know about him, Roman said. He wants to know what I know and who else knows it, and how much time he has, Nia said. She lowered the phone. He's going to run. If he doesn't have confirmation that we're onto him by morning, he'll run. Let him run, Roman's attorney said. We have his name, we have his access records. He's access to the Foundation's filing systems, Nia said. Digital and physical. If he runs tonight, he cleans the systems first. Everything that could corroborate any of this audit trails, access logs, communication records, he can reach all of it before morning. And if the originals are gone, she stopped, looked at Roman. We need him to not run, she said. We need him to think he's still ahead of this, Roman said. He understood immediately. She could see him tracking it. Which means someone needs to call him back, Nia said. And that someone is me. No, Roman's attorney said. Yes, Nia said, because if anyone else calls him anyone from your organization, any investigator, any attorney, he knows immediately. But if I call him back and I sound like Nia Caldwell at the end of a very bad night, tired and rattled and just wanting to go home, he buys it. He's known me for 2 years. He thinks he knows exactly what I sound like when I'm overwhelmed. He'll ask you questions, the attorney said. He'll be probing for information. Then I'll answer them, she said, with exactly as much as I want him to have. You've never done this before, the attorney said. I've been managing Marcus Delaney for 2 years, Nia said. I know every tell he has. I know when he's fishing, and I know when he's satisfied. I know what he sounds like when he thinks he's gotten what he needed. She looked at Roman. 3 minutes. I keep him on for 3 minutes, and I give him enough to make him feel like he still has the upper hand. That buys us time. Roman looked at her for a long moment. The look of someone measuring not the plan, but the person proposing it. You understand, he said quietly, that if he figures out what you're doing mid-call, he won't. If he does, he won't, she said. Because Marcus has always underestimated me. He has underestimated me for 2 years, and he is underestimating me right now. And that is the one thing in this entire situation that I can guarantee. Silence. Then Roman said, Dana, can you be ready to move on the digital access the moment she's off the phone? I need 15 minutes to position it, Dana said. She was already on her own phone. Tell me when she's going to call. 5 minutes, Roman said. He looked at Nia. 5 minutes. Nia nodded. She took one breath, the breath her mother taught her. Then she called Marcus. He picked up before the second ring. Nia. The overmeasured pace was there again, but smoothed slightly. He'd had time to calibrate in the minutes since he'd left the voicemail. Hey, thanks for calling back. You okay? Honestly. She let a little of the exhaustion in. Not performance, it was actually there. All of it. The whole weight of the evening sitting right behind her voice, where she didn't need to manufacture it. Not really. It was a lot. I saw some footage, Marcus said. Careful. Watching his step. Looked like things got intense. It was intense, she said. The Harrow situation, I think there's going to be some legal stuff. I don't fully understand it. One of the donors, this D'Angelo person, she let his name sound like someone she'd only just encountered tonight for the first time. He showed up with some investigators, and there were documents, and I don't, Marcus. Honestly, I don't know what I walked into tonight. Pause. She could hear Marcus breathing. Did they talk to you, he said. The investigators. For a little while, she said. They asked me some questions about the Q3 records. I told them what I know, which is basically nothing. I just process the files. I don't make the financial decisions. She paused. I think they're mostly focused on the Harrows. I don't think I'm part of whatever they're looking into. What kind of questions did they ask you? Marcus said. The carefulness in his voice had shifted. He was leaning in, now she could hear it. Stuff about the archive room, she said. Whether I'd ever pulled any files from Q3. I told them I'd been in there for general filing stuff, but nothing specific. A pause. Did I do something wrong, Marcus? Should I be worried? The thing that happened on the other end of the line was very small and very telling. A slight release of breath, the specific exhale of someone who has just received the information they needed. No, he said, and his voice had lost some of its careful quality. Not all of it. Enough. No, you didn't do anything wrong. These situations can look scary, but if you're not involved in the financial side, you're not exposed. Okay, she said. The relief in her voice was real enough she was actually relieved, because she could hear it working. Thank you. I was freaked out. It's going to be fine, Marcus said. Just go home, get some rest. Don't talk to anyone about tonight until you've spoken with the Foundation's general counsel. That's just standard practice for any employee when there's a legal situation. Don't give any more statements without representation. Okay? Okay, she said. Yeah, that makes sense. Good. Another pause. And Nia, the archive room thing. When they asked you about the Q3 files, you said you told them you hadn't pulled anything specific? There it was. She'd heard it. The question he'd been building toward the entire 3 minutes, the only question he actually cared about, wrapped in everything else, delivered as casually as he could manage, which was not, in the end, very casual at all. Right, she said. I mean, I've been in there plenty of times for general stuff. But nothing specific. Nothing that I don't even know what they're looking for, exactly. Right, Marcus said. Right. Okay. Another breath.
I'll get some rest.
Thanks, Marcus, she said. Night. She ended the call. Her hand was shaking. Not badly. Just the fine tremor of someone who has been running on adrenaline for 2.5 hours and has just spent 3 minutes performing calm while every instinct they have was screaming in the other direction. She set the phone down on the table and looked at it for a second before she trusted herself to look up. Roman was watching her. He's satisfied, she said. He thinks I don't know about him. He thinks the investigators asked routine questions and got routine answers. She paused. He's going to hold. At least for tonight, Dana, Roman said. On it, Dana said from across the room, already in rapid conversation on her own phone. What's she doing? Nia asked. Foundation's digital systems, Roman said. Her team is flagging every file Marcus has access to and setting up alerts on any modification or deletion attempt. The moment he touches something, we have a record of the touch. Can they do that without his knowledge? They're doing it right now, Roman said. Nia exhaled. For approximately 15 seconds, she let herself just stand there without processing anything, without calculating or tracking or managing. Just standing in the ballroom of the Meridian Hotel at midnight, in a dress with red wine soaking cold against her ribs, feeling the particular exhaustion of a person running for so long they've stopped noticing that their legs hurt. Then her phone rang again. Unknown number. She looked at it. Looked at Roman. Answer it, he said. She did. Miss Caldwell's voice, not Adeline Cruz. Younger. Professional in the specific register of someone who is professional under pressure. My name is Sandra Okafor. I'm with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I've been in contact with Dana Reyes for the past 11 minutes. A brief pause. I understand you've had quite an evening. Nia felt Roman go still beside her. I have, she said carefully. I need you to understand something, Sandra, Okafor said, and her voice carried the weight of someone delivering information that has been decided upon at a level above the current conversation. The situation with the Harrow Foundation has been under federal monitoring for 7 months. Not investigation monitoring. Watching. Waiting for someone inside to move. A pause. You moved. Nia's hand tightened on the phone. We have records, Sandra Okafor continued. Independent federal records, collected through entirely separate channels that corroborate the core fraud allegations. We've been waiting for a provable chain of custody on the Foundation's own documents to move forward. A pause. We understand there's a complication with the documents you provided to Mr. D'Angelo. Yes, Nia said. We also understand there may be original documents held by an independent board member. Adeline Cruz, Nia said. Her car was run off the road an hour ago. Someone took her bag. A silence on Sandra Okafor's end. Then, is she physically okay? Minor injuries. She's okay. We need her tonight, Sandra Okafor said. With or without the physical documents, her testimony about what she found, what she took, and how she secured it is evidentiary. It supplements what we already have. Combined with your testimony and D'Angelo's cooperation, this is, she paused, And in the pause, Nia heard someone choosing their words with the care of a person who deals in accuracy for a living. This is enough. Cruz can get to a federal facility tonight. She's on the Eisenhower, Nia said. Her car is in a ditch. I'm sending a vehicle right now, Sandra Okafor said. What I need from you is to stay where you are and don't let D'Angelo move or make any public statements until I have people on the ground with you. Can you do that? Yes, Nia said. 20 minutes, Sandra Okafor said. Maybe less. The call ended. The room was silent. Roman was looking at her with an expression that was for the first time all evening, not entirely controlled. Something had gotten through the architecture. Something that was not quite surprise and not quite relief, and was located in the space between them, in the fact that for 7 months there had been federal eyes on a situation he'd been working inside of, and that information had not reached him, and he was processing what it meant that it hadn't. They've been watching, he said, not to Nia, to himself, mostly. 7 months, Nia said. He looked at her. They were watching me too. Probably, she said. They wanted to see what I'd do with it, he said. The understanding was arriving in his face, the same way it had arrived in hers, piece by piece, each piece reconfiguring what she thought she'd known. If someone inside the foundation surfaced the fraud and brought it to me, they wanted to see whether I buried it or acted on it, whether my legitimate business interests and my less legitimate ones were going to. Whether you could be trusted, Nia said. He looked at her. They were waiting to see if you'd do the right thing, she said. With the evidence. With me. With tonight. Something moved through his face that she didn't try to name. And he said. You did, she said simply. He looked at her for a long moment. Long enough that the room became aware of it and found reasons to look elsewhere. Then he turned away, and his posture had shifted marginally. Something had set down that he'd been carrying, or something had been picked up. She couldn't tell which. His attorney appeared at his elbow. The footage has been shared 400,000 times, he said quietly. Comment section is, I don't care about the comment section, Roman said. The Harrow family attorney is calling for comment on the investigator's presence tonight. No comment, Roman said. Nothing. Not until the federal people are in this room. The attorney went away. Dana Reyes crossed back to the table. I've got Marcus Delaney's digital access locked. He can log in, he can browse, but anything he tries to modify or delete gets flagged and copied before it processes. He won't know it's happening. She looked at Nia. The moment he tries to clean something, we have him. He'll try, Nia said. Tonight he'll try tonight. I know, Dana said. We'll be watching. Nia looked at the table, at the documents still spread across it, at the wine stain on the front of her dress, which had dried to the color of rust, at the laminated seating chart that she'd set down at some point in the last hour, and was still here, still sitting on the corner of the table, the most ordinary object in the room. Table 14, near the back. She'd been assigned table 14. She looked at the seating chart, and she thought about the version of herself that had stood in front of a bathroom mirror that afternoon, holding eyeliner, asking whether any of this was worth the trouble. She didn't have an answer to that question yet. She wasn't sure the question was the right one anymore. The ballroom doors opened. Not investigators this time. Not attorneys. A woman walking with the particular gait of someone who has been in a car accident in the last 90 minutes and is moving through the residual shock of it on sheer determination, one arm held slightly away from her body. A cut above her left eyebrow that had been roughly cleaned and was no longer bleeding, but was going to bruise significantly by morning. Gray-haired, 60-something, still wearing what she'd been wearing when she left her apartment, which was a practical dark coat with one pocket that she was gripping with her right hand, even though the bag was gone. Adeline Cruz walked into the ballroom and looked around it with the sharp, assessing eyes of someone who has been sitting with a weight for 14 months and has arrived at the place where the weight gets put down. She looked at Roman. She looked at Nia. Miss Caldwell, she said. Her voice was steady, steadier than it had any right to be. Miss Cruz, Nia said. Are you? I'm fine, Adeline said, in the tone of someone who will address that question later and has more important things right now. The bag is gone. The physical documents are gone. She came further into the room. But they made a mistake. She reached into the coat pocket she'd been gripping with her right hand. Not a bag, not a folder. Something small and rectangular. A USB drive on a keychain, a very ordinary one, the kind you get free at conferences. The kind no one thinks twice about, which she held up in the light of the chandelier, with the specific expression of someone producing the thing that changes everything. Scanned copies, she said. Time-stamped. Stored on an encrypted server I've maintained independently for 14 months. With a key that exists only here, she closed her fingers around the drive. And here. She touched her temple. They took the paper. They didn't know about the digital backup. She looked at Roman D'Angelo. I've been waiting, she said, for someone to come to me that I was sure I could trust. Someone they didn't own. She paused. Nia called me. Yes, Roman said. That tells me something, Adeline said. About her. About you. She looked between them. I'm prepared to give full testimony tonight. Everything. How I found it when. What I did with it. Why I waited. All of it. She turned to Nia. You should know, she said quietly, that your name appears in the documents. Nia went very still. Not as a conspirator, Adeline said quickly. Target. Specifically flagged 8 months ago. In an internal communication I have, in these scans as a person of interest, who might eventually find the disbursement irregularities through her administrative access and needed to be either managed or discredited before she could do anything with it. The blood in Nia's ears was very loud. They knew, she said. They knew I might find it. Before you even started looking, Adeline said. Yes. Nia looked at the table, at the documents, at the wine stain on her dress, at the laminated seating chart. Marcus had asked her to come tonight. He'd practically begged. He'd said someone from admin needed to be there for setup coordination, and she'd believed him because it was plausible enough, and she hadn't had any reason yet to examine people gave her for things. Marcus had made sure she was in that ballroom tonight. Not because of the evidence. Not just because of the evidence. Because if Nia Caldwell was going to find something eventually, and she was, they'd assessed that she was innocent. It was in the documents Adeline had been holding for 14 months, then better to have her find it here. In public. In circumstances that could be controlled. In a situation where her credibility could be managed before she managed to establish it. The humiliation hadn't been a side effect. It had been the plan. She felt something move through her that was very quiet and very total. Not anger, she was past the stage where anger was a clean emotion about this. Not grief. Something that was the specific feeling of a person understanding, completely, the full scope of what had been done to them, and then making the decision about what to do next, from that complete understanding, rather than from the partial picture they'd been working with before. She looked at Adeline Cruz. She looked at Roman D'Angelo. She looked at Dana Reyes, who was already on her phone, already moving. She looked at the ballroom around her, the empty tables, the abandoned champagne glasses, the chairs pushed back at angles by people who'd left in various states of urgency. The chandelier light still doing its job, scattering itself across marble floors that had held the weight of this evening without comment. Okay, Nia said. Her voice came out quiet and very steady and completely certain. Then let's finish it. And at that exact moment, Dana Reyes looked up from her phone across the room with an expression that cut through everything else in the space, and said, he moved. Marcus just tried to delete the Q3 disbursement audit trail. We have him. The deletion attempt lasted 11 seconds. That was how long it took Marcus Delaney, sitting wherever he was, sitting at midnight on a Friday in Chicago, to open the Foundation's digital archive, navigate to the Q3 disbursement audit trail, select the files, and initiate the deletion command. 11 seconds of movement that Dana Reyes' team captured in its entirety, every click, every timestamp, every file name, the IP address of the device, the login credentials used, precise sequence of a man destroying evidence while believing no one was watching. He had no idea the files were already copied and flagged, and that the deletion had processed into a void that preserved everything he thought he'd erased. It's done, Dana said. She was looking at her laptop screen, with the expression of someone watching a very important and very irreversible thing happen. He deleted 43 files. We have all of them. We have the deletion event itself. We have his credentials on the action. She looked up. That's obstruction, on top of everything else. Where is he? Roman said. The IP traces to a residential address in Lincoln Park, Dana said. His home. Roman looked at his attorney. The attorney was already on his phone. Sandra Okafor's people arrived at the Meridian 17 minutes after Nia's call ended. 4 of them, which felt like both too many and not enough for what the evening had become. They were efficient and quiet in the way of people who had been briefed in the car on the way over and arrived already oriented, already knowing the shape of what they were walking into. Sandra Okafor herself was 40-something, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the specific quality of someone who had spent 15 years in federal prosecution and had long since stopped performing seriousness because the real thing required too much energy to perform on top of. She shook Nia's hand first, then Roman's. Then she looked at Adeline Cruz, who was sitting in a chair that someone had found for her, the USB drive on the table in front of her beside a glass of water that she hadn't touched. Miss Cruz, Sandra said, I've been hoping you'd surface for about 5 months. I've been hoping for longer than that, Adeline said. The scans, everything I have is on that drive, Adeline said. Scan files are time-stamped from the day I removed the originals. The encryption key is mine alone. The server is registered to an independent hosting service with no Foundation or D'Angelo connection. She paused. I also kept a written log, handwritten, dated entries from the day I found the first irregularity. It's in a safe deposit box at a bank downtown that nobody connected to the Foundation has ever visited with me. Sandra Okafor looked at her for a long moment, the look of someone doing a very rapid and very thorough assessment. That's good work, Sandra said finally. Not as a compliment exactly. As an acknowledgement, professional to professional, of a 14-month solitary operation conducted by a 60-year-old woman on an independent Foundation oversight committee who had decided on her own, without resources or support, to be meticulous about a thing that mattered. I've been doing good work for 11 years, Adeline said. The trouble is, I was the only one looking. Sandra pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. And the next 2 hours were the most exhausting of Nia's life. Not dramatic, not high stakes in the visible way the evening had been high stakes. Just the dense, grinding work of testimony of sitting across from federal investigators and attorneys and walking through every detail of every piece of information she had in sequence, completely, without editorializing or collapsing or reaching for shortcuts, even when the shortcuts were available, and every exhausted muscle in her body was asking for them. Sandra Okafor asked good questions. The specific kind of good that felt almost like being taken apart and reassembled questions that went sideways when you expected them to go straight, that returned to things Nia thought she'd already covered from angles that illuminated something new. She asked about Marcus 7 times, in 7 different framings, pulling the picture from every direction until it was complete. She asked about the archive room twice. She asked about the night Nia had decided to reach out to Roman D'Angelo, not what Nia had told him, but why him specifically, what she'd known or suspected about his organization and its relationship to the shell companies in the documents, and what she'd been prepared to do if he'd turned out to be a dead end. I would have figured out something else, Nia said. What something else? Sandra said. I don't know. I hadn't gotten that far. A pause. I've learned to solve the problem in front of me before I start solving the next one. Sandra wrote something, and if he'd been involved in the fraud, then I would have needed a different door, Nia said. There's always another door. Sandra looked at her over the top of her reading glasses. Miss Caldwell, when you found those documents, the ones in the archive room, the ones that turned out to have the metadata problem, you carried them alone for 6 weeks. Yes, you went to work every day. Sat at your desk. Spoke to Marcus Delaney regularly. Yes. Knowing what you knew. Yes. Sandra set her pen down. Not the way Dana had set her pen down. This was different, more deliberate. The setting down of someone who has stopped taking notes, because the next thing she wants to say isn't for the record. That must have been very hard, she said. Nia looked at her. She hadn't expected that. Not from this woman, in this context, at 2 in the morning with legal pads and laptop screens and the machinery of federal process spread across the table between them. Yes, she said, it was. Sandra picked her pen back up. Thank you, she said, and went on. At some point, Nia didn't track exactly when the ballroom had become very quiet around them. The other investigators had dispersed to various tasks she couldn't fully see. Roman was in a separate area of the room with Sandra's colleagues and his own attorneys, his testimony running parallel to hers, their accounts being built simultaneously from their separate angles on the same months-long situation. Adeline Cruz had been moved to a quieter space, an anteroom off the ballroom's east side for her own session, which by all appearances was thorough and lengthy, and was going to result in the safe deposit box being opened in the morning under federal supervision. The chandelier above Nia was still lit. She was aware of it with the odd, hyper-present attention of extreme tiredness, the way light through your haze when your eyes are dry, and you've been awake for longer than your body was designed to sustain without objection. It scattered itself across the marble floor exactly as it had when she'd arrived. At this event, however many hours ago, the same light doing the same thing in a room that was now a completely different place. 3:47 in the morning, Sandra Okafor closed her legal pad. We have what we need from you tonight, she said. There'll be follow-up, probably significant follow-up, over the coming weeks. You'll need your own legal representation for some of it, independent of D'Angelo's team. I know, Nia said. You should also know, Sandra said, choosing her words with the particular care she'd used all evening when delivering information rather than asking for it, that what you brought forward, even with the chain of custody complications on the initial documents, is what moved this case from monitoring status to action. We were waiting for an inside witness with direct administrative knowledge. You are that witness. What happens next happens because of what you did. Nia absorbed this. Even though someone used me to do it, she said. Even though Sandra said. The fact that Marcus Delaney and whoever directed him tried to weaponize your honesty doesn't make your honesty less valuable. It just means they understood exactly how valuable it was. She paused. People who try to weaponize other people's integrity generally understand it better than anyone. She stood, extended her hand. Nia shook it. Sandra Okafor walked away toward the anteroom where Adeline Cruz was, and Nia sat alone at the table for a moment, with her hands folded in front of her and the legal pad where Sandra had been writing, still sitting there with its dense pages of notes. And she looked at it the way you look at evidence of a long conversation. After the conversation is over, as an artifact of something that happened and cannot now unhappen. She thought about Marcus. He would be arrested before morning. She knew this without being told the deletion event, the access logs, the evidence that had been building for 7 months. In federal systems she hadn't known existed, all of it was enough and more than enough. He was probably asleep right now. Or not asleep, probably awake. The way you're awake when you've done the thing you thought would buy you safety, and you're waiting for it to settle, not yet knowing that it didn't. She didn't feel anything clean about that. She'd imagined, in the abstract, that the moment the trap closed on Marcus Delaney, there would be something satisfying about it, something that resolved. What she felt instead was tired and sad in the specific way you feel sad when someone you worked alongside, someone you handed coffee to on Monday mornings, someone whose too small tuxedo you'd noticed and not said anything about when that person turns out to have been working against you for reasons you still didn't fully understand. Why Marcus? What they'd given him or promised him? What it cost him to be that person for however long he'd been that person? She didn't know. She might never know. The questions felt important enough to carry and unanswerable enough to put down, and she was too tired, right now, to do either correctly. Roman appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision. He didn't sit down immediately. He stood at the other side of the table, with his hands in his pockets. He'd been without his jacket for hours, and his shirt had the slightly undone quality of formal wear. At the end of a very long night, collar open, sleeves pushed to the elbows, and he looked at the empty legal pad space across from her. "How are you doing?" he said. "I'll tell you in a week," she said. He almost smiled. Not quite. the near smile of someone who recognizes the answer as honest. He sat down. For a moment, they were just two people at a table in an empty ballroom at 4 in the morning, and the quality of the silence between them was different from all the other silences of the evening. It's not the silence of something about to happen, but the silence of something that has happened and is still settling. The footage, she said. Still circulating, he said. It'll peak tomorrow, and then the federal angle will overtake it. The story changes as the facts come out. Your name is in it, she said. My name is always in things, he said. That's not new. This is different, she said. This is you publicly associating yourself with a whistleblower, with an investigation with. She paused, the right side of something. He looked at her. Does that complicate your life? She said. Not sarcastically, actually asking. Probably, he said. Some of the people I do business with are going to have feelings about it. Are you? She started. I knew what tonight was going to be when I walked down those stairs, he said. I'd been watching from that balcony for 40 minutes. I knew exactly who was in this room and what the footage was going to look like and what my name was going to be connected to in the morning. A pause. I knew before I took the jacket off. She looked at him. Why? She said. Not why did you help me? She knew that part. She'd known it since West Washington Street, since he'd read the documents and looked up at her with that particular gravity and started asking questions that weren't the questions of someone looking for cover, but of someone actually trying to understand. She meant something more specific, and he understood what she meant. Because you sat across from me 4 months ago, he said, with documents that implicated my companies, and you handed them to me anyway. You didn't know if I was going to bury them. You didn't know if I was going to turn you over to the people whose names were in them. You had no protection and no guarantee, and you came anyway, because you decided the right thing required it. Paused. Most people don't do that, he said. Nia was quiet. I wanted to see what would happen if someone like me did it back, he said. She sat with that for a moment. The plainness of it. The absence of the romanticized version, the dramatic version. The version she might have expected from a man who lived in rooms where everything was leverage. Just the honest account of someone who had been moved by something and had made a decision. What happens to your business, she said. The investigation is going to look at your companies. The shell companies in the documents. My legitimate companies are clean, he said. The names that appeared in the documents were used without my knowledge or authorization. That's been established and documented, which is part of what we built over 4 months. A pause. My less legitimate interests are a separate conversation, and one that's been ongoing in various federal offices for considerably longer than tonight. That's a careful way to put it, she said. It's an accurate way to put it, he said. She looked at him steadily. I need to ask you something directly. Go ahead. The Harrow fraud is real, she said. The money they stole is real. Community programs that money was supposed to fund, those are real. I need to know that when this is over, that's what gets fixed. Not just the legal case, not just the Harrows going to trial. The actual damage to actual people. That's what the evidence is for, he said. I need more than the evidence, she said. I need to know what you're going to do. With your resources, with your access. She paused. You have the ability to push for asset recovery, to support the independent oversight that the foundation needs while the investigation runs, to use your business relationships to make sure that process doesn't get buried under the legal proceedings. She held his eyes. That's what I need to know you're going to do. Roman looked at her for a long time. You're not asking me to rescue anything, he said. No, she said. I'm asking you to fund what already exists and get out of the way of the people running it. Something's in his face. The specific settling of a man who has just been asked for exactly the right thing by someone who understands the difference between the right thing and everything else. Yes, he said. And I want it in writing, she said. Before anything else. Before any public statement. Before any press release. Before your legal team starts managing the narrative. Written commitment to funding independent oversight and community program restoration with Adeline Cruz on the board of the oversight structure. Adeline Cruz just had her car run off a road, Roman said. Adeline Cruz walked into this building at midnight with a USB drive and gave testimony for 2 hours, Nia said. She can handle a board seat. He almost smiled again. Closer this time. Yes, he said, written, before anything else. Thank you, she said. They were quiet for a moment. Outside the Meridian's tall windows, Chicago was doing what Chicago does before dawn in the fall, the specific dark that isn't quite night anymore, but isn't close to morning either. The color of a city that has been going all night and is not going to apologize for it. Somewhere out there, Marcus Delaney was in his apartment not knowing. Somewhere out there, Celeste and Vivienne Harrow were in whatever rooms they'd retreated to, and Vivienne was probably awake, because Vivienne Harrow was the kind of person who would not sleep in a crisis, and this was a crisis. And she would be awake, running the numbers on what damage could still be managed, and finding that the answer was very little. Nia thought about Vivienne's face, the moment of crack before the seal came back. The hand on Celeste's arm. She didn't forgive them. She wasn't going to perform forgiveness for the comfort of a narrative that needed it. That wasn't who she was, and it wasn't what this was. The Harrows had stolen from programs that served people with nowhere else to go, and they had done it deliberately and over a long period of time, and the consequences of that were going to reach further than any trial ever would, into individual lives that were already difficult before the money disappeared. What she felt about them was not forgiveness and not hatred, but something grimmer and more durable, the specific determination that their names would not be the end of the story. The nonprofit, she said. Roman looked at her. You mentioned it, she said. Months ago, near the end of one of our meetings. You said that what I was doing, whistleblowing, internal reporting, being a person who noticed something wrong and refused to put it back, you said there was no infrastructure for it. No support system for people in my position. I said that, he said. I've been thinking about it since, she said. Not as something you do for me. Not as something you build and I run, because you're the one with the money and I'm the one who needs the help. That's not the structure I want. She paused. I want to build something for the people who come after me. The next administrative assistant who finds something wrong in a filing system. The next facilities manager who notices procurement fraud. The next junior accountant who sees a number that doesn't add up and doesn't know who to tell. She paused again. They need legal resources before they've done anything yet. They need to be able to talk to someone who knows how this works before they make the moves that can't be unmade. They need to know there's somewhere to go. Roman was watching her with his full attention. I can fund that, he said. I know you can, she said. What I'm telling you is the terms. Complete organizational independence. I have final authority on structure, staff, and mission. Your funding is a grant with conditions on reporting, but not on direction. If you try to influence the work, the grant ends, and I find another source. You have another source? He said. Not yet, she said. But I will, a beat. Those are hard terms, he said. Yes, she said, another beat. Longer. Okay, he said. She looked at him. Just okay, he said. You know what you're building. I don't need to redesign it to be comfortable putting my name on it. He paused. I told you 4 months ago I wanted to see what happened if someone like me did the right thing. I'm still running that experiment. Nia looked at him for a long time. She thought about the man she'd expected to walk into that office on West Washington Street, what she'd steeled herself for, the version of power she'd been braced to encounter. Person who would weigh the documents against the exposure and choose the exposure, or who would sit across from her with the comfortable benevolence of someone who helps people on the condition that the help makes them feel good about themselves. He wasn't that. He was something more complicated than that, and less clean and more real. And the complicated, unclean, real version was what she'd been able to work with for 4 months, in a way that the comfortable version never would have allowed. The experiment is going to keep costing you, she said. I know, he said. Are you okay with that? He met her eyes. Ask me in a week, he said. She felt something shift in her chest that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite not one. The first movement of something lighter than anything she'd felt since she walked into this building wearing her midnight blue dress and her mother's pearl earrings, braced for a few hours of silent auction coordination and table 14 invisibility. The dress was ruined. The wine had dried to the color of rust across the bodice and wasn't coming out, and she'd known it for hours. And she was only now letting herself actually feel the small particular loss of it, the dress she'd saved 3 paychecks for, the one she'd stood in front of her bathroom mirror to assess, the one she'd decided was fine. It was a good dress, she thought. It did everything it needed to. The sun came up over Chicago the way Chicago sunrises happen, not dramatically, not with the orange and gold performance of somewhere else, but practically, efficiently. The city's light doing the same thing it did every morning, without asking anyone's permission or waiting for a convenient moment. It came through the tall windows of the Meridian's ballroom and landed across the marble floor in long, pale rectangles and caught the dust that had accumulated during the night's events. Floating in the air, the way dust floats in morning light in rooms where many people have been, and most of them have left. Nia was still there. She had called a car 20 minutes ago and it hadn't come yet, or she hadn't checked whether it had come. And she was sitting at the table with her hands around a cup of coffee. Someone had found and brought her without being asked 6, and the coffee was hotel coffee, which meant it was mediocre. And she drank it anyway, because the warmth in her hands was something real and present, and she needed real and present. Adeline Cruz had left an hour ago in a federal vehicle. She'd stopped beside Nia on her way out and put a hand briefly on her shoulder, no words. Nothing that required words, and then walked out of the ballroom with the posture of someone who has been carrying something heavy for 14 months and has just set it down and is now learning to walk without the weight. Roman's attorney had pressed a card into Nia's hand with the name and number of an attorney he knew independent, not connected to the D'Angelo organization, someone who could represent Nia specifically in the coming weeks of federal proceedings and depositions and the legal architecture that would take months to fully build. She'd put the card in her clutch next to the one Adeline Cruz had given her 11 months ago, the one that had sat in her nightstand until she needed it. Roman came back across the room toward her. He'd been outside. She'd watched him through the window, standing on the hotel's outer steps, for 10 minutes in the early morning light, probably on the phone, probably managing the beginning of whatever the morning's news cycle was going to do with last night. He came back in with the particular quality of someone who has just stepped outside for air and is returning to a room they're choosing to return to. He sat down across from her. He didn't have his jacket. It was somewhere still on the table, maybe, from when she'd put it down. She looked for it, found it folded over the back of a chair 20 feet away, and the sight of it there, dark and expensive, and folded with the slightly approximate precision of someone who folded it quickly in the middle of doing other things, struck her as the most human thing she'd seen all evening. "It went out to National this morning," he said. "The footage." "I expected that," she said. "Federal involvement will hit the news by noon. Your name will be in it. I know. You're ready for that?" She considered the question, honestly, the way she'd been considering everything tonight, without the cushion of the answer she wished were true. "No," she said, "but I'm going to do it anyway, so ready doesn't matter." He looked at her. "That's essentially how everything works," he said. "I know," she said. "I've been doing it my whole life." She drank some of the hotel coffee. Reddy never showed up. I stopped waiting. He was quiet for a moment. "Your mother," he said. She looked at him. "You mentioned her once," he said. "In passing, months ago. You said she taught you something about dignity." She remembered. They'd been at the end of a long meeting, the 4th or 5th one, and she'd been tired enough that something had slipped through that she usually kept in. She'd said something about Loretta. She didn't remember exactly what. "She did," Nia said. "What did she teach you?" he said. She thought about it. Not the phrase, the one she'd been carrying. Dignity isn't something wealthy people can grant or take away, but the thing underneath the phrase, the actual living instruction that Loretta had delivered not primarily through words, but through the specific and continuous example of a woman who had worked double shifts and raised a daughter alone and moved through rooms that weren't built for her without ever condensing herself to fit. "She taught me that belonging doesn't come from a room," she said. "It's not something a room can give you or take away. You carry it or you don't." She paused. "She also taught me that the people who try to take it understand exactly what they're taking. she said. Which means they know it's real. That's the thing. They always let on when they try to take something. They're telling you it's valuable. Roman was quiet. Outside the windows, Chicago was fully awake now. Traffic sounds beginning. The city's ordinary machinery starting its daily operations, the way it did regardless of what had happened in a hotel ballroom overnight. Regardless of what federal investigators were doing, or what footage was circulating, or what names were about to appear, in stories that people would read over their morning coffee and feel strongly about and mostly not fully understand. The laminated seating chart was still on the table. Nia picked it up, looked at it. Table 14 near the back. Her name was printed on it in the small plain font the foundation used for administrative materials. Nia Caldwell, Harrow Foundation admin, with her table number and a seat number. And nothing else. The bare minimum information required to place a person in a room. She set it back down, stood up. Her left ankle registered its complaint at the return of weight the heels had been off for hours, sitting under the table, and she put them back on now because she was not walking out of the Meridian Hotel in her stocking feet, not after everything else. She straightened the ruined dress. She checked her clutch phone, cards, keys, Loretta's pearl earring that had come loose at some point in the night and that she'd found on the floor near the table and put carefully in the clutch's inner pocket so it wouldn't be lost. She had both earrings. She hadn't realized until just now that she'd been worrying about that, quietly, below everything else. She picked up the cold hotel coffee and finished it. Roman stood when she stood, not as a performance of manners, but as the instinctive response of someone who has spent a long night in the same room as another person and moves when they move. The written commitment, she said. My attorney will have it to you by end of day, he said. And Adeline Cruz's seat on the oversight board. I'll call her this afternoon, he said. She'll have opinions, Nia said. I'll listen to them, he said. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the specific directness he'd had since West Washington Street, the Bosomeone Wincitiate, which was rarer than it sounded, rarer than she'd known to look for before she'd encountered it. Roman, she said. Yes, thank you, she said, for the jacket. It was the first time she'd said it directly. She'd been carrying it all evening, the moment of it, the jacket on her wine-soaked shoulders in front of 40 phone cameras and a silent ballroom, not with the weight of gratitude exactly, but with the weight of recognition, of having been seen at the exact moment she was supposed to be invisible. He didn't do the thing people do when they're thanked for something significant, the deflection, the minimizing, the reflexive. It was nothing that is always a small lie. He just held her gaze. You didn't need it, he said. No, she said. You were going to stand there anyway. Yes, she said. I know, he said. That's why I brought it. She picked up her clutch, walked across the marble floor of the Meridian Hotel's ballroom for the last time. Through the morning light that was now fully established in the tall windows, the empty tables and the abandoned champagne glasses and the chairs that would be rearranged by the time the hotel opened for its next event, past the place where she had stood in a wine-soaked dress with 40 cameras aimed at her, and refused to cry, and refused to kneel, and refused to be reduced to what someone else needed her to be. She pushed through the ballroom doors. The lobby was starting to fill with the early morning hotel traffic, a few business travelers with rolling luggage, a family with young children who should probably still have been asleep, a man at the front desk arguing quietly with someone about a reservation. Ordinary morning. The ordinary machinery of people's lives, running on ordinary tracks, indifferent to the night that had happened in the room behind her. Nia walked through it. The car she'd called was waiting on Michigan Avenue. She could see it through the glass doors, a gray Cézanne, practical, exactly what she'd asked for. The driver was looking at his phone. On the steps outside, two people were already on their own phones, taking photographs of something, probably the federal vehicles still parked along the hotel's side entrance, which were going to attract attention as the morning progressed. She pushed through the glass doors. The October air hit her face the way Chicago October does, with the particular sharpness of a city that doesn't soften its seasons, cold and clean, and carrying the smell of the lake from a few blocks east. After hours in the artificial warmth of the ballroom, it was almost shocking. She stood on the hotel steps for a moment and breathed it. The driver saw her and got out of the car, opened the back door. She walked down the steps. She thought about Loretta. Not with the specific grief she'd been carrying for 14 months, but with something adjacent to it, something that was the feeling of a conversation she couldn't have but needed to. She thought about what Loretta would say about last night, and the specific words she'd use, the particular way she had of cutting through everything unnecessary to reach the true thing. She thought Loretta would probably say something like, "Well, you stayed," which was not the same as saying it went well, or that it was worth it, or that the outcome justified the cost. Just the specific acknowledgement of the thing that was most true about the night, which was that Nia had stood in that ballroom when everything in her wanted to leave, and she had stayed. She got in the car. The door closed. The driver got back in. Michigan Avenue moved past the window, the city going about its morning, the lake glinting somewhere to the east, the ordinary, relentless, beautiful, difficult fact of Chicago in October. Nia leaned her head back against the seat. She was not the same person who had driven to this hotel last night in a midnight blue dress, questioning whether any of it was worth the trouble. She knew this the way you know the things that are true without examination, not because she felt transformed in any dramatic sense, but because she had done something that required the full weight of who she was, and the doing of it had made that weight visible to her in a way it hadn't been before. She knew what she was capable of now. She knew the dimensions of her own endurance. She knew that she could carry something alone for 6 weeks and walk into a room with it and set it on a table in front of a man whose involvement she couldn't confirm and say, "Here it is. Do what you will with it. I've made my decision." She knew that when an entire ballroom told her she didn't belong, she had stayed. She closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look at it. She let Chicago move past the window, and the morning come up over the buildings, and the weight of the night settle into the thing it was going to become, which was not a story about what happened to her, but a story about what she did. That distinction, she'd understood it since Loretta taught it to her, in the way Loretta taught most things, not by saying it, but by living it, day after day, in rooms that weren't built for her, with a dignity nobody had given her, and nobody was ever going to take. Nia Caldwell kept her eyes closed. She breathed the breath her mother taught her, and went home.